All right. Welcome, everyone. Sally Joe is running into technical problems. Adam's running a little late, and we have a special guest coming on the way too. Sally, like, I don't know what happened to Sally. Nope, she's still sideways. There we go. All right, now she's fixed.
I was trying to make it so it'd be widescreen, but
it doesn't want to be widescreen. It's okay, Sally. We love you the way you are. So yeah, we got one more. We got one more coming. The only one you really want to hear from, the volunteer. So we were just attendees. Who wants to hear from the attendees?
Right.
Yeah, I really want his perspective. It's going to be exciting. So I'm just going to start with introductions. I'm Mark. Hopefully you know who I am. By this point, at the last minute, well, not really the last minute, but sort of late in the thing, I figured out a way to go to Symbolic World Summit all the way down to Florida. It worked out really well, and was excited to go. People doing a thing, right? Participation, another conference. I've been to the Arkansas Convivium Conference. If you haven't seen those videos, they're awesome. And I went to Thunder Bay. Didn't make Chino. Father Eric was there. He can't join us, unfortunately, today, but that's okay. We mostly sort of hung out together. So obviously, this is Navigating Patterns. In case you're watching on a different channel, that sum I thought was really good, and I took the Universal History path, and I was really excited to go, not just because it's a thing, but because I've been sort of adjacent to Symbolic World for a long time. I'm on their little Discord server and in their little Facebook group and all that, and I don't participate much. And big fan of JP Marceau. I've talked to him a few times. I got to meet him in person. That was fun. So I really wanted to go just to see everybody and see what they were up to, and I was happy that I was able to go. So Sally, tell us like who you are and why you went and all that.
Hi, I am Sally Jo Michelson Cooper. I am working to be a professional artist. I do a big amount, I don't know, it's majority right now, contribution of visual arts to Navigating Patterns, as well as I have Sally Jo Michelson Cooper YouTube, and that is my visual arts practice translated through YouTube as opposed to galleries, because galleries are mostly trash right now. So that's what I've been dealing with. And yeah, I was really excited to hear Paggio and other professional artists talking about art that was not devoid of meaning, not strangleheld by the postmodern psychonarrative, and not in hatred and opposition to beauty. So that was wonderful. Just everything I had hoped to find from other artists at art school has been through online communities, Navigating Patterns, and and one of the absolutely most outstanding ideas that came through the conference. Not all art is good, and we should be able to judge it and have standards, and discipline is necessary. And yes, and all we have to do is make good art, because there's no competition for that right now. And it's like, yes, I do it.
And you took the artist path,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So Jonathan Paggio and Vesper Stamps, and there was another. I'm terrible at names. I'm sorry. There was another icon carver who applies modernist techniques to icons, and that was a wonderful thing to put modern color usage and some of these modern techniques in their place in correspondence to the rest of the language of art, because actually Rothko and Monet and some of these big names, if they are in context with the rest of the language of art, did add something good, because it was this modern use of colors that had never been available in that quantity before. And that stuff can be applied to the old languages and can be used in this healthy way. And it just hasn't been, and that's been just sad.
Okay. Adam, we'll do 2 more V's last because he's our special super guest. I'm so excited. I'm going to hear you last. Okay, Adam, go ahead. Tell us who you are and why you went and what you're excited about, etc.
Sure. So I'm Adam. You might have seen me on some of the videos here on Navigating Patterns with Mark, talking about history, and so it's a little wonder. Then I chose the universal history path, and not so much the artist path. Although that would have been cool to do as well. Unfortunately, we had to choose one. So um, I know. So that's yeah. I flew out to Tarpon Springs all the way from Ireland, which is where I live. And yeah, I mean, it was really a great opportunity first to meet, Mark and Sally and Father Eric, right? And secondly, it was this Symbolic World Summit, and meet all the people that we met there. Wonderful time. And so yeah, I mean, I'm an amateur historian, but nevertheless, that's kind of why I was there, certainly.
Excellent. 2 more. So nice to have you, sir. I'm so excited. I feel like because you get the inside track because you get in on the volunteer thing, which is just fantastic. So yeah, go ahead, take it away. Tell us what you want to tell us. As a quick introduction to yourself and all that.
Yeah. Well, I'm a musician. I worked with Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Pajot and like a few others on the side. Pajot's brother, for example, is stuff that I'm partly working on right now. I worked with Akira the Dawn in 2019, and after that started to also make speeches in my own music. Like I recorded stuff for him, and then later on I started to do that with my own music as well. And I think I've been following the whole thing since let's say 2018, 2019, so about 5 years now. Which was then like it was pretty crazy to meet all those people that I have been talking to online for so long, to finally meet them in person. That was nice. Yeah, I was flown out by my mate Paul, who he messaged me at the end of I think in the middle of last year when it came out that the summit was happening, and said like, you got to be there, and then just paid for my tickets. That was pretty crazy. God bless him for that. And then I talked to Neil DeGrade from Dirt Poor Robins, who got me in on the volunteer thing. So that I could, attend, because the tickets were also like I couldn't have paid any of this. It's like I'm a poor student. I don't have any money, and so that was a pretty good opportunity to get in, and then also fun because I got to see the whole, the backstage stuff and like build everything and all that with my mates, and then yeah, that was very exciting, very fun. Very touching in the end as well. Like the whole thing was pretty, like I was very emotionally touched by the whole thing, and especially the end. Yeah, that's like as a short introduction.
No, that's great. Thank you. I'm so glad that you were able to come. Wouldn't have expected it because I know that he's a musician. He doesn't have any money. He's a good musician. Only the bad musicians have money to play stupid pop music. So yeah.
I'll take that.
Yeah, no, I mean it was great. Yeah, so with Father Eric and Sally Joe and Adam and Elizabeth was there too, right? And Justine and stuff. That's sort of the Peterson sphere, right? That's what we sort of call it, right? That's sort of the petersonsphere.com. We've got the timeline up. It's looking good. We've got this sort of thing that happened, right? It's all Peterson's the lightning rod for it, right? Symbolic World is sort of the closest and oldest sort of contingent within the Peterson sphere that's not Peterson, right? Mm-hmm. Because Peugeot was with Peterson sort of in the beginning, right? He caught him way before he got popular. And so this is the most mature, in some ways, community. I know we bandy about community. They even talked about that in the thing. A lot of people just talk about community, but are they really, is this really a community? Because you slap the name on it. But Symbolic World really has a community, right? They really have not just a following, but they have a bunch of projects going where they're actually making things happen and doing things and getting together and putting on a wonderful conference. for me, the conference was much larger than I thought. I don't know how many people were there exactly. I heard a rumor it was 700. And that was expanded from like 500 or something, but there were a lot of people there. And the venue was really nice. We sort of got there a little early. Father Eric's plane came in late, but Adam and Sally Joe and I were there sort of early. We went up to the Orthodox Church first, and then we were walking back down to the conference center. Neil deGrasse was coming up the street. I was like, "Whoa, it's Neil deGrasse! Oh my goodness!" I was so excited. And he was like, "Mark," and I was just like, "This is so weird." All these people know me. I don't know them that well.
I'll say I spotted him. I spotted him first.
You spotted him first? Yeah, I think I was
spotted him in the auditorium. I was like, "Is that who I think it is?"
Yeah,
That's
you saw
Santa
the
Claus,
auditorium.
yeah.
I was like, I can't tell. Like I just couldn't tell.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But then later he was coming up the street while we were going down. He told me this wonderful little story. He said, "Yeah, I gave a talk a little while ago, and I was talking about navigation and patterns and stuff like that. And somebody told me there was a YouTube channel called Navigating Patterns, and I checked out your channel. I looked at a couple of videos. And I said, nah, this isn't for me." I'm like, okay. And then he said, and then I think it was weeks later or something, Monsieur Peugeot did his tweet where he, basically gave what I still think of maybe immodestly as the best YouTube channel review of all time. This is good work. You really got to check it out. All right, my channel sort of blew up there. And he said, "I've been watching you ever since." And I was like, okay, that's a weird story, but I love it. It's very symbolic worldy, right? It's very sort of what happens.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had a lot of people come up to me and say, "Hey, Mark, you don't know me, but I like your channel. I really found it helpful, or I know people who found it helpful." And I was just kind of blown away by that. So that was really nice. Just to be in with people. I wouldn't have expected so many people from Symbolic World or people interested in that to know my channel that well. Although I'm sure Mature had a lot to do with that. I wish he had been there. Unfortunately, he was not. But it was really nice for me. Sally, what did you find, especially, we'll kind of do it in order, about the beginning, like the first day there, which was basically one speech in the conference, right?
I mean, especially just standing on the steps with the people willing to be there like hours early and stand on the steps and know each other. And actually, they were the perfect steps because they were those long, slow steps underneath shade, and people just wanted to sit. And like, it's like what you think about when you see those Greek paintings where everybody sits on the steps and talks about something. That's what it was like. It was actually like that. You were so into it. I was worried about you dehydrating, and I was like, we're gonna find water for people because this is the kind of event I remember guys faint because they don't drink water. And so it was good. It was really good. But I think the in-between portions were as much, if not more, valuable than the speaking. And I think they did a really good balance of that intentionally. Like, I think it was totally right to have the first day after lunch and to be less formal. And then the following days to have the long lunches and have the breaks, because you need the time. You've bothered to come all the way out here. You need the time to see each other and know people. And also just having it at a more out of the way place helped with that too, because it wasn't in a fast paced place. They picked a place with a slow environment. There wasn't a road going 100 miles an hour beside it. We could have had more amenities, and that would have been worse, actually.
What'd you think about the first day, Adam? What do you?
Well, for me, it was kind of it was this kind of slow start. It was good that it was after lunch. I think the most interesting part for me of actually the first day was going into the Orthodox Church, mainly because I had never been in one before. And it was kind of like I kind of had, because I'm a Catholic, I'm like, I have to navigate this. Like, how is this? It's familiar, but also unfamiliar. And then it was kind of looking at the iconography, and then generally the first day it was, when it came to the content of the conference, it was there wasn't like it was Peugeot's initial speech, I think, right? And that was, and then we had the Dirt Poor Robins concert. That's what's kind of salient for me during that first day. But that the time with other people, and it's even if you're not talking to them, but you're in the same space. I mean, there were a couple of, this might have happened the second or the third day, but like there are just things that you see, which is like you don't see it anywhere else, and you're like, oh, that's I'm glad that I could be here to see that. You know, and I mean, when Father Eric came, you know, you're like, oh, Father Eric's over there, go get him. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And I think this is during Peugeot's speech. And I kind of duck under the cameras and walk over to him. And it's like, you know, he greets me with a hug. And I'm just like, wow, this is great. And so, yeah, certainly the first day there was kind of, it was relaxed, but it was quite, I think, intimate. So,
Ooh, I like
strangely
that word.
enough. Strangely enough, you know, you think first day of the conference is going to be kind of, but no, once people started talking, they started talking. I ended up talking to a dude in the line to get our little badges. I got 2 of them. I don't know why. I got 2 of them. I didn't order 2. The way I say it is I get 2 because I'm Irish. So that's kind of how that works. Yeah. So
sounds reasonable.
So that was the first day for me, anyways.
2 more. What did you think of day 1 and all that? Please.
It was crazy. We were there also pretty early. I think we started, building stuff at around 10. So we got there at 9:30, I think. And got a coffee. Before that, we talked to 2 of the other volunteers. I think they were the ones that I was hanging out the most with as well. We were joking a lot throughout the whole conference. That was fun. So we built everything, all the black stuff, like the curtains, I think, and then what I noticed was that I didn't know John Hears. Of course I heard of his brother. I think everyone on the Authorsphere has, because of like the discussions that have been going on, but I didn't know him or like the First Things Foundation. I was kind of surprised because he had he introduced himself as, I think, the Cosmic Clown or something like that, and I think he was a perfect choice for like being the moderator of the conference, because like you could have gotten someone more formal, and I think it would have disturbed the vibe of the conference. And he was just fun and very approachable, so that was pretty nice. And the Dirt Poor Robins concert, I was really looking forward to that. Sadly, I was in and out all the time because we were at the merch selling stuff as well, and so I had to be there from time to time. But what I heard from it was amazing. It was really great seeing that. I think it was a proper start, like having only Peugeot's speech and then the concert. Otherwise, I think would have been harder to get into, but we won't know. So yeah, it was great. It was great, and yeah.
Yeah, I like that. These are great points, right? I like that slow start, just starting the afternoon, starting a day before you would expect it, right? It's Thursday, right? And then and Thunder Bay did some of that too, right? The slow start sort of thing, and I thought that was great. And yeah, hanging out on the steps, Sally, was awesome. You get to meet Aaron. I met Aaron in person, and he gave you pencils, right? So you get free art supplies. It's like bonus. Yeah, little baby pencils, beautiful little pencils. And yeah, the concert was wonderful. I was utterly shocked at how good they sound live. I'm completely blown away. Very few bands can sound as good live as they sound on an album, but man, Dirt Poor Robins, it's almost identical. It's really, really good.
Yeah, the accuracy that I think if I remember correctly, Kate and Neil met when they were working on a musical production or something like that. So you'd know that they're professionals, right? But the accuracy that they display on their records and then live as well is just mind blowing. I talked to I'll talk about that when we get to the second day. Yeah, it was
Okay.
amazing.
Yeah. No, I will say Niels Grade is an unbelievable guitarist. I was watching some of what he's doing. I was like, wow, that's amazing. I can't play because I have baby girl hands. So I took years to play guitar, and it's never gonna happen. It's never gonna happen. Believe me, I spent hours. It's just now.
I feel you. That was part of the reason. That was part of the reason why I switched to bass when I started playing. Not gonna lie, like
I could probably play bass, right? Yeah, maybe a thin neck bass, but I can't hear how good guitarists are because I don't have that connection in my head. But when you watch them, it's like, oh wow, wow, that's amazing. And Niels Grade had that quality. The other thing that Father Eric said, since he's not here, I'll parrot for him. He couldn't be here today, unfortunately. He was like, yeah, that solo had that kind of Steely Dan feel. I was like, okay, yeah, it does have that Steely Dan feel. I agree with that. So I thought the concert was fantastic. I know we had a couple technical problems, but like wasn't that bad. And the venue was really good for sound. Like it's set up for that anyway. Because half the venue is a gym with basketball court.
I gotta say, getting it to that point was a hassle though. Like I watched the sound check. It took some time. Like it was a fight to get it to sound as good as it sounded at the concert in the end. I was very impressed that they made it work. Also, I gotta say, like every time I watch a musician that good, I'm always half embarrassed that I call myself one, because I'm maybe I shouldn't tell, but I'm sitting at home and I'm playing things like 200 times until I get them to sound kind of the way that I want them to, and then he's standing there just as if it's nothing. But good for me. They don't have a shaming vibe. Like there's some musicians where they actually shame you when you're not as good as them. It's the opposite with them. Like I feel highly motivated when I listen to, like on my flight back, when I listened to Firebird for the first time, and then I think 10 times in a row I listened to the whole record. It was amazing.
Yeah, no, he probably has been practicing that over and over and over. Doing it for years. He doesn't look like a young man to me.
He looks like Santa Claus. That's I'll go with that forever. Yeah, I think I met the parents. I met his parents. They were coming in. Where's my son? I was like, who is your son? Oh, it's Neil from the band. I was like, oh yeah, Santa Claus. He's over there. So it's yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, they had a little bookstore up front, kind of, right? They did such a good job. The venue was really good for that sort of thing, and being near the water and the beautiful Florida weather didn't hurt at all. Let me tell you, it was rather nice. And the weather was perfect for the whole thing too. That was the other thing, and it was nice too to transition sort of from the evening, hey, how you doing, kind of get together, find people to have meals with and whatnot, into day two, which was the first day of sort of serious conference. Like now we're gonna conference like professional conference people. And doing the Universal History Path for me was great because huge fan of Universal History. I think it's fantastic. Huge fan of Richard Rowland. I did get to shake his hand too, although that was on the last day. It was nice. I got to get him on Twitter. I can't message him on Twitter, so I got to fix that. Or maybe he'll hear this and fix it. It was great to be able to hear what people were saying in person, because I think it makes a difference. The only bad part for me was the gymnasium, which is where Universal History was, had terrible sound.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you, I've said it before. Lighting is almost impossible, but sound is actually impossible. Like even in a tiny room like this, I got soundproofing all over the place. You can't see it. That's the way it should be, by the way. I got soundproofing, right? I've got the microphone right here. I've got a good microphone, right? Sound is impossible. The only problem with the gymnasium was if you sat far back, which I generally prefer to do, there was too much echo.
Yeah, sure.
Oh.
and that was the issue for me. So the second talk in the gymnasium, I was right up front, and that actually did fix most of the problem. It wasn't a huge problem, but there was a little bit of an issue there. So that got fixed. But it's different when you're there in person, listening to somebody like Richard Rowland speak, right, or Jonathan Peugeot or whomever on the stage. There's that dynamism that isn't there otherwise. And I like what you pointed out, Sally, about space. Space is super. I'm going to be doing a video on space. It's probably a live stream at some point on space. Space is the thing that people are missing. Because we get these stupid cell phones that steal our attention all the time, and we're getting used to having our attention. Yeah, mine's way over there. Usually I have it right here, but it's being charged. Yeah, exactly. It's chucking across the room. Yeah, we're used to getting our attention constantly pulled, and then we wonder why we're anxious. Well, you're anxious because when space comes along, and I guess my argument would be space is where wisdom happens. Then you get anxious because you're like expecting the next. People have reported this whole thing where they feel a buzz from their phone, even though that their phone's not on them or it's not buzzing. So their brain is looking for this constant attention grabber, and it's not there. And the nice thing about the conference, he's gonna throw all the attention grabbers away. Excellent. I've got my email shut off on the laptop. Yeah, I do all kinds of little things.
The amazing thing about the conference, I don't know if you guys noticed this, I didn't even want to look at my phone because all the stuff that I was interested in was there.
Right.
I think the only one who used his phone was Jordan. That seems to be a general habit.
Yeah, and amazing that he could be there and be relaxed. That was
I didn't know who he was. He was amazing. I mean, he just made the whole conference like really like having Joe there's awesome, and having Richard Rowland there's awesome, and seeing the concert's awesome. But John Hares did such a good job. He was so funny, and you can tell he totally understands the language. He gets all the Vervaeke language. He gets all the symbolic world language. He just understands the Peterson sphere lingo really well. And the jokes he told on that lingo almost had me on the floor for real. I mean, I was just in stitches with some of the stuff.
Emergence. Yeah, inside words. I remember that. What was
words,
the other one?
Outside words. And he kept going back. Like a good comic does that, right? They make one of those jokes, and then they go back, they refer back to it over time. Yeah. And he was so good with that. He did that with like 3 or 4 of his jokes. And he did such a good job. And that really kind of holds everything together, right? Like that's the job of the MC, is to hold everything together, do those transitions, right? Smooth things over between the spaces, right? Smooth the spaces over. Yeah. And I think the nice thing about this conference was the amount of space in it. Thunder Bay had a nice amount of space too, but given the size, I was really surprised that there was that much space. And the other thing, especially the first couple of days, no one was mobbing the stars. That didn't hold true in the end. But in the beginning, people were really respectful, and Joe is like just hanging out. No one's bothering him. He's just talking to the people he needs to talk to, right? So I thought that was really good. I really like that.
Yeah, you don't want to embarrass yourself. Like, really, it's not like you're going to like a rock concert or something, because the thing that you're there for is like the intellectual bit. And so if you then walk up to everyone, it's like, oh, can we take a picture? Can we take a picture? And I'm not like criticizing people who took pictures, but it's kind of weird. Like, to me, it felt weird to reduce it to that. So in the end, like, I didn't ask for one. And in the end, I walked by like the VIP room where Jonathan was talking to the other guys, and he called me in so that we could get one. And I told him, like, I'm glad you asked, because I didn't want to. That was
Well, how much more special have that picture than one you forced? And this is where I'd say there was some barriers to entry that people are absolutely crying about, but I'm glad that they existed, and they wouldn't have had money, but how would you put another one on? Because you can't exactly have people climb a mountain right now. Although that would be a cool bar to entry. I can't climb this mountain. You just
Next year.
requires a level of serious commitment, and like having only so many tickets be available, having to in advance, having Greek Florida, all of these things were things that people had to overcome. So the people that did come paid in this other kind of way too, and that's part of what puts people in the right headspace to be there. And you can hate that if you want to, but that is what makes things good. It's
Right.
It's like putting on dress clothes to go to church. Well, if you show up stinking from the skate park, it's not as nice for everyone as if you have to come in your cleanest. Like, I'm not saying ritziest either, just cleanest. It's that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, the filter is important. It was expensive. I was like, why is this conference so expensive? Oh my goodness, what is going on here? But yeah, I'm a big fan of filter. Like, people don't understand, right? Because we're all thinking about equality, but the filter is important because it makes sure the riffraff doesn't get in. Because if the riffraff can get in, they're going to riffraff, and they'll ruin it for everybody.
Like, for me, that is the only thing remotely like that I've for sure done in 5 years, but maybe in my life, because I'm very prudish about spending money. Like, I like to buy stuff that's going to make me more money, but I don't just spend on trips or clothes or whatever. I don't do that. And so it was a very unique and distinct thing within my life. And I'm glad that I did that. Like, I don't know. It wasn't Disney World. I wouldn't have paid that to go to Disney World. And you would have. Nobody would complain either, because that's how much Disney World costs. So.
Yeah. Adam, you kind of came from quite a distance there, and sort of at the last minute too, right? So, and what did you sort of think overall, the quality of people and stuff that were there and the events and stuff? No, now we can't hear you. You're on mute. Did you mute yourself?
Yeah, that's my bad. Yeah, there were a lot of families there. It was great. That was I think one of the major parts for me, was seeing, husbands and wives and their children, and then those who weren't there with their spouses or whatever. You had I mean, it was a great set of people to talk to. I think having a sort of barrier to entry in that way probably did filter out the people who would like mob Peterson or mob Peugeot. I think I really enjoyed it. I met a lot of Catholics there, who I've trying to keep in touch with, which is great. And it's good. It was good.
Oh yeah, there were a lot of Catholics there, weren't there? Relatives.
We were out forced, weren't we? Yeah. I mean, like I flew in from Ireland. There was something like a 12-13 hour flight in total transit, like, and you were nice enough to pick me up and drive me out there, and we shared a hotel room, which was great. And so, like, having that and then coming in, talking to all the people, I think, it was a great experience. I was really, really happy. Like, there were young guys like me, who were there, who came out from, some of them were coming from all over the US. And one of them I met was an artist, and he was kind of saying, there's nothing like this here that we have here for artists. And like, I heard that from you, Sally, beforehand, and I'm like, okay, fair enough. And then when I kept on hearing it, I'm like, oh, this is something that's very unique, I guess, in the artistic space that's happening here, that I don't really I wouldn't have had a full appreciation of, because I mean, in some sense, I'm kind of here for the history.
Yeah. Well, I'll apologize to both of you up front. Artists suck, and they're like, it's like herding cats, and they're never on time for anything. And getting to do anything is impossible. So yeah, I mean, but this is great for artists in particular. So I think two more, you came from the furthest. So what was your trip like, and how was what did you find stood out to you, we'll say, about the attendees?
Well, yeah, I came from Europe, so I think I do think I had the furthest trip from everyone attending. I wouldn't know for sure, but I think so. That was fun. I never been to the States before. The
Oh,
furthest I've been was like I think the Dominican Republic, sometime in the 2010s,
Okay.
like family vacation, and so that was very interesting to see that. To see that the United States are actually a real place and not just some made up bit that like Hollywood came up with or whatever. So that was fun. I told that everyone that wanted to hear, and I think a few people who didn't want to hear it. Like we Europeans, we grow up with like media portraying the United States, and so every movie that we watch and every show and whatever is like filled with your particularities. And then being confronted with that, like on a normal level, let's say, is quite, maybe that's a bit too big of a word, but it's quite surreal to some degree. And then about the attendees, I think that the whole thing, I think Pajot mentioned that as well. The whole thing seemed like a dream. Like it didn't seem. Excuse me for a second. It did, I'm sorry. Didn't seem like a didn't like it. Yeah, it seemed like a dream. And the people there were all very, very open, very much willing to share their life experiences, and just get into conversations right away. Like normally you have like, I'm weird about meeting people, and until I'm comfortable with you, I'm kind of quiet. And so like people just crossed that bridge very, very quickly. I can't remember everyone's names, but there were a bunch of people who just came up and then told me how they got there. And like one guy told me about like a healing journey that pretty like personal stuff, but it didn't feel out of place to share it. It seemed like the proper place to do so. Yeah.
yeah, I got that sense as well. Like a lot of people seem to be, because they all knew they were there roughly for the same reason, right? Like there's an ethos, right? There's a purpose behind this. It has a telos, right?
Yeah.
And people know why they're there. They know what they're doing. They know roughly that they're interested in symbolism, either the artsy side of symbolism or the historical side of symbolism, or maybe they're just there for the stories, for Martin Shaw's stuff, which I didn't get obviously enough of. I gotta dive deep on. He had some of the most penetrating, interesting things to say. I actually have notes that I wrote on my cell phone. Cell phone alerts were off the whole time, but every once in a while, cell phone comes in handy. So I was using it for notes. So I thought that was really nice. But yeah, you're right. The attendees had this certain familiarity, and so it was very easy to get in conversation with them. I'm also a bit of an introvert. People come up to me and I'm like, oh,
Okay.
you're gonna stab me? I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, but
And
like
Elizabeth-
the whole room felt like there was. I mean, that's maybe a bit weird to say, but the whole room really felt like there was like. I had that thought for a second. It's like literally no one in this room is out to get me. That's like
Yeah.
that was
Right.
that was nice. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
It wasn't full of strangers. It was full of people you didn't yet meet.
Mm-hmm.
And that was okay because you knew those people when you met them, you were gonna like them, right? They're right. They're not threatening at all. And Elizabeth was telling us that she couldn't be here. She's off at Italy or en route to Italy or something. It was nice to meet up with her there. She was saying that Tarpon Springs had the largest Greek concentration of Greek people in the United States because of the sponge farming, because they're right on the Gulf Coast and sponges grow there. And we ended up, Sally and Elizabeth and Justine and I ended up going to a little soap and sponge shop that was very nice. And it was nice to see the familiar faces there. I knew Father Eric was going, I knew Sally Joe was going, I knew Adam was going. Right. I didn't know if Elizabeth was going to be there. Right. Like I knew the speakers were going to be there. There were a bunch of people there that I didn't expect. A few people I hadn't met that I knew from online. right? But yeah, there was no one was really threatening, except for maybe that one little incident that maybe we'll touch on later in the Q&A. But nobody was really threatening at all, or everybody was getting along, and everybody was there for the same reason. They were there to do the same thing, which is to explore the symbolic world, right? And to talk about this cosmic image and what we can do about the cosmic image. Well, when you're looking at the cosmic image, you're looking up, and you're roughly speaking trying to at least look for or at the same thing. And that, I think, is very important, because when you have that enchanted view of the world, right, that three-dimensional view of the world instead of flattened view of the world with politics or economics, you actually, you can do things like cooperate and have a really large conference, and everyone gets along and has a great time, and no one feels threatened, and so conversations are more easily had. Sally, what about you? What about your experience with like the attendees and the people there? And because you're pretty shy.
What? Okay, no, I'm not shy, but no, it was very good. Yeah, people were there they had that common thing that was outside of each of them that allows people to work together. And that was immediately apparent. And it was really interesting because even though you have the whole Orthodox group and the Catholic group and the other strays like me in there wasn't really tension. I don't think there was any like, oh, well, this is the real truth going on, hardly at all. There was a lot of like, what do you have to offer, and taking it in and breaking bread and trying to hear each other, and that, why do you have interest and how does that compare to why I have interest? And then there was so much similar things going on. And I think the split between history and art, it was really cool to define that and make people choose, because it really showed two of the major strains that were not religious. Like, how awful would it have been if we're like, oh, Catholics go to this room and Orthodox go to this room? No, that would have tore people apart. But separating out the art from the history somehow pulled people together. Like this guy that I met, the Aaron, we had both decided, because somehow it made sense to go to the Symbolic World with a new sketch pad and a new watercolor set, and we had bought the same brand name of watercolors, and we just kind of geeked out over that for a minute, because that, and I don't know why that made sense, right? But it was very fun to find out that made the same kind of sense to another person from the same space as me, and that was very unifying, and I think a lot of people were enjoying that.
Yeah, and you hadn't even met Aaron online. I've talked to him many times.
Nope.
And that was online. That's that front step experience.
Right.
Before we even got badges.
Right.
That was lovely. Yeah, that was really nice.
I met him online once or twice, but I'm not sure. I don't think so. Not that I could recall.
Yeah, I don't know that you've run into him. He was on BOM a few times, and he would pop in at really weird times and have really long conversations about what he was doing, which are interesting projects for sure. But yeah, I hadn't seen his sort of artsy side, because he was more just talking about VR and what he was doing to help people and things like that. Yeah, his projects, the storytelling and all that, is what he's more into. Adam, what did you think about? I mean, did you interact with any of the Orthodox or any of the sort of outcasts other than me that sort of didn't, aren't Catholic, aren't Orthodox, or are just sort of there?
Yeah, well, I talked to a couple of Orthodox guys, yeah, and that was interesting. I think to a large degree, a lot of the guys I ended up talking to kind of just by chance were Catholic or Catholic adjacent. But I think I mean, yeah, it wasn't. There wasn't like outward tensions, but I mean, it certainly on the first day or second day, Father Stephen DeYoung was kind of needling Latin a little bit, and I wasn't having that. I was like, no, this is he's like, we got to go to Greek because Latin and Virgil are boring, or Latin and Virgil is boring, and I'm like, you know, and I'm glad I'm glad. I think a lot of the Catholics in the audience were like, no, we're not having this. You know?
Father Eric stood up.
Father
Good
Eric
job.
stood up in his Roman cassock. You know, he does canon law, so he's one of the guys who knows Latin very well as part of his duties within the church. But I mean, yeah, that was fun and games, really. At the end of the day, you know, you know, I got to talk to a recent convert to Orthodoxy, and he was telling me about like so he took out his prayer rope. I don't know if that's the correct term, and I took out my rosary, which is here, and I said, oh, you know, how do you pray the prayers and stuff like that? I'm like, and it's, you know, pretty similar structure. I mean, right at the end of the day. And then we were talking about, you know, liturgical year, feast days. I was like, yeah, I mean, you guys had Dormition recently. That's what we call Assumption, you know, but they're the same day of the year. Unlike Easter, you know, depending on the calendar that you're on, Orthodox and Catholic, it will vary. But something like Dormition and Assumption. So it was kind of very kind of inside baseball Christianese stuff, but it was good, and it was a good kind of exchange to be there for that time, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I have some notes of things that stood out to me. Some of them are probably quotes. So I did want to go through some of that and just sort of by way of reflection, right? These are sorts of the things, and I won't do them all at once. That would be 18 lines. One of the things that stood out to me, this is almost certainly day one, and I don't know what spawned this, this particular thought. I'm typing on my phone, I can't take full notes. I don't have a keyboard in front of me. Thank goodness I didn't. We try to self-generate intimacy as an individual. And the fact that something like that would come out in it, I mean, it's appropriate. Symbolic world, right? Symbolism is all about connections, right? This multivariate sort of many connectedness of the world, enchanted way of seeing the world. And I've been sort of ruminating in the mature Peugeotian sense on that, and I see it everywhere now. I just watched a talk that Manuel somehow thought I should watch, and I should. It was just, I was like, what did you make me watch? This is terrible. What are these people talking about? This is awful. But now that I have that framing, it's very interesting to see that in action, where people are sort of subsuming the world into themselves and then saying, well, I did this. It's like, I mean, did you though? Was it the you that did that, or are you embedded in something like I don't know, you could call it, I use some random word like creation, that was here before you, that was curated for you by many people you've never would have met, right? Your ancestors and the ancestors of others who built the world, and now you're taking advantage, and rightly so. I mean, they left it for you, of that stuff, right, to do more things, right, which is hopefully more things towards the good, and not, but that whole idea that we try to self-generate intimacy as an individual, because that's going to fail, because intimacy isn't about you, right? It's about the quality of the relationship with something else. Again, there's really four things, right? There's you, the thing, the relationship, and the quality, right? And so I found that deeply helpful. Another thing that sort of occurred to me, I don't know where the hell this came from. The idea of rationality, we'll say, more in the biblical frame, is self-awareness. And for this ability, right, this is obviously going back to the tree and the fruit, that whole, I didn't read that story. I heard it's good. You must now work, right? And so you gain self-awareness, but now you have to work. Because I think that's part of the lesson. And so I know it's at work, but I think because a lot of people are down on work, and I'm like, I don't know, people need to work. Why? Well, maybe because we were given rationality. All this self-awareness you want is work, right? It's work to be self-aware. So those are sort of the first two things. I don't know, Sally, you got some notes or some thoughts, things that occurred to you?
during the conference as a whole.
Or as a result of?
I very much enjoyed Martin Shaw's, it's Martin Shaw, the 12 secret name idea. But I mean, everything he said was just like, he was like, it's like everyone else is talking with existential crisis and he's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he has a video called 12 Secret Names on his channel too, which I actually watch. It's a short one.
It's and basically we've all been talking about this disenchantment of the world, the disenchantment of the world, the disenchantment of the world. And at no point have I seen anybody even imply that perhaps we could re-enchant it. And he seems to be like, oh yeah, right here. And it was like, that was pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yep, please.
No, that's something I noticed as well, is that like the whole thing that Jonathan is doing, especially with his articles and the way he talks about symbolism, it's like laying out and explaining, let's say, the mystery to some degree, getting people, and it's necessary, getting people to, lay off the old or the new way of thinking and take on the old way of thinking and seeing the world. But in a similar way that John Heers pulled the conference together on a let's say on a technical level, Martin Shaw did so on a different level. He wasn't talking so much about what's going on. He was just telling stories mostly, and I think that's the point. Like he was the summit of the summit in a sense, because that was the thing that we're actually working towards, is to be able to do that, and to understand them as well, but understand them not intellectually, but understand them instinctually.
It's like someone explaining to you what a gymnast does, and Jonathan and Jordan and Vervaeke and on have been explaining what gymnasts do, and Martin Shaw just very gracefully did like the forms right through the room, and everybody's like, we've been looking for that. And
But I like where that went. Yeah, I'm probably remiss on my part, right? Like what is the summit, right? It's reclaiming the cosmic image. It's like, oh, what is the cosmic image? How do we reclaim it? Well, it's this thing that requires symbolism, roughly speaking, right? It requires this many-to-many relationship. Huh?
No, you said roughly speaking. I said Bucko. That's just because it's a Peterson lingo. It was a dumb joke. I'm sorry.
No, it was a good joke. I like it. But yeah, I and it is a difference. I would call it more intuitive or experiential, is what Martin Shaw did, right? He dragged you into the experience in we'll say the stories that he was outlining. And that's what this conference was about to a large extent, was reclaiming this cosmic image. What does that mean? I mean, I might call it revivification, right? That's more Peterson frame, right? But yeah, you want to get to the point where that idea of the cosmic image is something that you can intuitively have an experience with. And that I thought was why the opening the space was so important as well. So it was kind of, probably should have opened with that, but hey, you get what you pay for. We're here, we're doing it.
People's inability to understand metaphor because of the scientific language is one of the biggest burdens we're under. And when you put a materialistic scientific way of talking, if you're doing that, you're dissecting in a very harmful way. Even if you're speaking scripture, you're dissecting in a harmful way, because the relationship, like a relationship to information, can be like a relationship to another person. And that's why when they were describing wisdom and hope and faith, they would make these personifications. I just reread a little bit of Proverbs today, and they have the personification of wisdom in Proverbs. And if you're thinking in a scientific language and reading that and not imagining it as a personification of wisdom, because it says, as she says, And like
Yeah.
this is personifying wisdom in this other way, and it really it flattens it out. It's like it's like taking the extract of an apple and making the apple flavor and then putting it in Kool-Aid versus having a whole apple that has a seed
Right.
apple in it that could actually give you infinite apples. Like
Right.
Kool-Aid,
Mm.
an apple, like an actual apple that could birth more apples indefinitely.
Right. Right. It's
There's
it's self-replicating in some sense, right? An apple.
a myth, because especially spoken myth isn't meant to be stagnant. It's not meant to be dissected. It's not meant to be particular. It's an essence of a thing that gives birth to more of the essence of a thing.
Right.
And-
Well, that's the reciprocally opening thing, Sally. And I think so. Sally Joe, who is probably the best person ever, found this book, which says "Poetic Knowledge," all right, and the recovery of education. And this is an argument or disagreement with John Vervaeke about the types of knowing. I will still argue it's not really knowledge, it's information, but it's that idea that, yeah, look, I mean, you're not going to be able to engage with church, with deep story, with any of these things if you don't have a way of poetically informing the world or parabolically informing the world, as Mary Cohen's original term was parabolic knowing. If you don't have that, you're going to run into problems. The sorts of problems that you're going to run into are an inability to see and experience the world the way somebody who has that can. So like if somebody from the Vervaeke camp were to go to Symbolic World, I don't think any of them were interested. I don't remember seeing any of them there. They wouldn't get anything out of it at all. I think that's true. I think mere exposure is not going to work because they're very scientific. I saw a tweet, I think it was yesterday, in fact. I sort of talk about this on Twitter, it's the age of gnosis. Someday I'll get my Substack up and write about the age of gnosis. They actually said in a tweet that text information was richer than being there in person. And I was like, what kind of a lunatic makes an inane statement like that? Statement is unintelligible to me. I don't even know how anybody could like say that. And they typed it out into Twitter and sent it to everybody. And I'm like, maybe this person shouldn't have Twitter. Maybe they shouldn't have the ability to transmit their ideas to anyone but their closest friends who can kind of pat them on the head and say, yes, and then back away slowly. Because I just couldn't imagine anybody saying that text had a richer information form than anything else, because it is the lowest form of information, technically speaking. Like if you want to break it down mathematically, I'm actually a data scientist, among other things. I can do that for you. That's why computers work, because you can represent text as ones and zeros. Technically, that's how all computers work, by the way. It's very information sparse, very information sparse. That's why it can be broken down into, I think technically 7 bits. You don't even need 8 bits. 8 bits, 8, 0, or 1 states. And so why you're making a statement about a text being richer than any other form, it's got to be the bottom of the barrel.
They want the extract. Don't give them the apple. They want the Kool-Aid extract apple. Yeah.
There's way more information in the Kool-Aid extract. And it's not. It's you're trading accuracy and precision, roughly speaking. That's what scientific information is. It's accurate and precise for depth and richness. And depth is another thing that sort of came up with Martin Shaw. He actually said, let me just find it real quick. It's somewhere here in my notes. Myth is the wildest, deepest way of telling the truth. That's a quote, I believe, from Martin Shaw. And I was just like, oh, I think I should write that down. That's really important, right? And I think that's what going to a conference and interfacing with people gives you. I mean, you can look at it, right? You'd say forums are like down here, and then talking to people live is here, and then seeing them on YouTube because you have the video is here, right? But then going in person, it blows them all away.
Dr. Shaw also had this idea that within a story, there is the skin, the flesh, and the bone. And then he demonstrated how that worked if you paid attention. And so, like, the skin is the thing you touch, the skin is the thing you make contact with. So, your colloquial references, your location. He did this neat thing where he was telling this story about this magical fox that asked for some soup. And he said, but here, he's like, in England, it's a fox, but here it would be the coyote. And that made so much sense to me because it wasn't about it being a fox or a coyote. It was about it being your local nuisance animal, right? And he would put these affectations on his characters and say, like, they were like this pop culture reference, even though these were these ancient stories. And he was doing that to give them skin you could touch. And then the flesh, I don't know how to demonstrate how he did that. I know that he did that, but I don't know how to demonstrate it. But the bones is the pivot angles. And so what was the story about? Was it to show a gratitude? Was it to show self-transformation? Those are the bones within the story. And that's why you can take, that's what they do in plays when little kids do plays. You can have little kids do plays and they can do it poorly and it can still have the same bones because there are essential things that make it Cinderella, essential things that make it Robin Hood, essential things that make it all these different things.
Yeah. It was interesting as well that with Martin Shaw, because he was telling stories to the entire audience, and I guess for a lot of people in the audience that was an entirely novel thing. But being from Ireland, that wasn't actually novel for me. That was most of my childhood, which was then stripped away as I grew older and I became more skeptical, and I kind of would dissect the stories and in some sense kill them. But that was kind of where I was coming from. And so it was interesting to see all these people get taken in, really, like it was and I had an idea of what was going on. It's like, oh, this is pretty familiar. Yeah, this is, I mean, he's doing it for the US, but yeah, good enough, you know?
The cowboy poetry is that way, and the tall tales. And we have a thing, if you tell a story big enough and they believe you, it's their fault. And so that's kind of always going on where I'm from. But I do agree with you, is like I slowly got annoyed with that because I wanted to be taken seriously and I wanted to be part of this other part of culture that looked more powerful and more serious and more reasonable, that wasn't bothering to tell the 30-point buck story or the white porcupine story. Oh my gosh, there's this white porcupine story where you catch the white porcupine right here, and that's how you catch it. And people will go into a hunting story and then it will become the white porcupine story. And so it's there at all. It's not real, but it's a very goofy thing.
Yeah. Cool. Right.
Yeah, Ireland has this tradition of storytelling, and the Irish are sort of famous for their tall tales, as we would call them, and their colorful enhancements or maybe exaggerations of events, and because you do have that fairy sort of tradition, right, where the magical world and the material world are they're right together. They're right together, and at any minute you could just cross over just like that without even realizing it. Right, Ireland very much has that ethos to it. And A, I'm part Irish, and B, I grew up around Boston's a lot of Irish. I'm very familiar with the Irish, you know, for better or for worse, gun runners. Right, so they, you know, but there is that flavor, and it is, you know, I want to loop back to something Tumor was saying. The problem with the U.S. is that, especially when you get a Hollywood vision, you get a Hollywood vision of a part of the U.S. The U.S. is basically, people don't understand. People here don't understand. The U.S. is enormous. It's a ridiculously large place, and so there are vastly different cultures. And one of the things I was doing the other day is I've got Tubi on my phone. And it's got all these old TV shows, and one of them is called Spencer for Hire, which is Robert B. Parker is the author, and they did a TV show on his stuff. It's set in Boston, and he grew up in Boston, so it's like a Boston TV show filmed in Boston with people who speak New England language from olden times, not that olden, unfortunately. And all the place references are places I know, and I remembered when I was watching, I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch an episode of this while I'm taking a bath, sort of thing, because I was trying to relax. The conference was very overwhelming for me. There's a lot going on, and I was like just appreciating that's not the same as Chicago Fire, right? The language they use, the colloquialisms, all different, right? It's not the same as what you'd experience in Florida, especially not in a Greek neighborhood, right? It's not the same as what you would experience in the Midwest, right? Different types of stories, different settings, different animals, different everything. And yet, the bones are recognizable. To your point, Sally, the bones are there, and they're sort of recognizable within the stories, and those deeply important stories are the way in which we have things in common. Now, the way I outline it on Navigating Patterns, if you haven't seen my channel, you really should. Right? It's story. That's at the lowest level, right? And then narrative are the templates or the patterns, right? And then they're pointing up to the archetype. And so you're never living in the narrative. The narrative is something hinted at by many stories, right? So many stories might hint at one or more narratives. Those narratives are pointing up at the archetypes. And that's why I think they're so hard to grab onto. And a lot of people, Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Peugeot, John Verveke in particular, they had a wonderful conversation probably about a year ago now, but they kept switching between using the word narrative and story. And I was like, no, you have to separate those two. It'll make it more understandable for you, right? But you really get that sense, especially with Martin Shaw, because, myth is the deepest, wildest and deepest way of telling the truth, right? And I think that's super important. I actually like the way he said that.
I missed to bring it up, I think like 20 minutes ago, but I'd like to go back for a second to what Adam was saying about let's say the attendees being consisting of Orthodox and Catholics, and then some of the others. So I think first of all, going to the Greek church, the St. Nicholas Church there as a Catholic, probably made most sense to become a little bit more familiarized with Orthodoxy, because it was a mixture, let's say. As I understood it, the iconographer that they got when they built the church was a Catholic, and so much of the iconography is very, very Catholic, as opposed to what we see in the general Orthodox churches that we have. And so I think that was probably made it easier maybe for Catholics to get to know it a little. And then there was the organ as well, which is something that we usually don't have, as far as I know, in Orthodox churches. I mean, it happens, but it's very it's not canon or anything like that. It's not like we have something that forbids the use of instruments, as far as I know, but we just don't do it. We have choirs, and then that's that. And so that was probably something that makes it more familiar. And then the other thing is also to that is maybe one of the most valuable things that I learned from Jonathan is that, as an Orthodox, obviously I would like for everyone to be Orthodox. I mean, as a Christian, you should want everyone to be Christian, because that's the way to heaven. I mean, that's a loving act to want that. But the approach that you have, especially, and I'm guilty of that as well, as a new convert or something, is that you argue with people and you try to convince them. And the thing that I learned from Jonathan was that it's you shouldn't try to convince people. It doesn't mean that you can't, let's say, argue your case, that you can't present orthodoxy and wish for people to see what you see, but it's I don't think that it ever helped anyone when you go at them and you have to convert now. I think
making it overly propositional, just completely planning it out, and rather than kind of pointing to the deeper things, which really, if it comes to stuff like conversion, that's really what's it's made of in some sense, or it consists of, rather than this kind of back and forth on propositions. I didn't know that church had an organ. It didn't even occur to me, but I guess it did. I think that also makes sense though, because in the dome they don't have Christ Pantocrator. They have
God the Father, yeah.
yeah, they do, yeah. So all the Catholic churches I've been in have had a depiction of God the Father or the Ancient of Days, and so I'm not too sure about all that.
Yeah, I don't want to speak too much on it. I don't enjoy it. I don't like when they portray God the Father. I think it's like I think you can make an argument for the Ancient of Days, especially since it's not the Father, it's Christ, as far as I understand it. But like this is one, it is an Orthodox depiction. I think it's from the 18th century, where you have Christ sitting on one side and then you have Christ sitting on the other side as well. It looks exactly the same, but with gray hair. And then you have like the Holy Spirit depicted as a dove. And so you can try to make an argument for that, because Christ says, he who has seen the Father has seen me. And if you want to symbolically show a father, then it would make sense to depict him with like gray hair or something. But I as uneducated as I am, I just shy away from it. I think it's good that we don't show the Father, because
yeah. Well, actually, and on that, Peterson, when he was talking, there was a big significant kind of portion where he was talking about fatherhood, and it was interesting because he was always describing it as emerging rather than something which comes down from above. He was kind of always pointing to, well, it's the kind of the amalgamation of all your ancestors, like you as a father is a kind of amalgamation of all your your father and your father's father, and etc. etc. But there wasn't this kind of recognition of father of all things that are so that that could be emergent. It's like fatherhood is possibly, I don't know, maybe the least, right? It is something that emanates down from above, because and it comes, I mean, it comes straight from like it's mentioned in the scriptures, all fatherhood gains its name from the Father in heaven. That's
True.
it. That's just so it's explicit. It's like it's an emanation.
I think in the experience though, you can maybe try and make a case for partial emergence, because like I'm trying to like actively move towards that role, away from like I'm at the end of my 20s, so I think it's good time to move away from the son towards the father, let's say, and like not religiously speaking, but like personally speaking. And I think that is something that for me, it is something that I feel is emerging out of like my depths, let's say. Definitely like necessarily informed from above, but like, I think that's the one case where you can maybe try to make it emergence, but otherwise, like, you're obviously right. Like, this identity comes from above, as technically every identity in a sense should come from above, right?
No, that's a good point. I mean, I think that I mean, not to criticize the great man, but Peterson tends to use the psychological frame immediately, and the psychological frame is inherently bound up in individualism. It's about you and your relationship to the outside world, and so your experience, all of your experience, has to be emergent. Has to be, right? The question is, what informs you? What is the formation? It could be many things. If you're not informed by the emanation from above, then what are you being informed by, right? And that, I think, is, we'll say one of the things that's sort of missing. The symbolism gives you the way to relate to that. That's, again, goes back to why I think it's important to differentiate between story, narrative, and archetype, right? Because it's the archetype that comes down upon you and says, no, this is what the hero looks like, right? Or this is what the old woman should do, right? Or this is what the relationship between you and nature should be. Those are archetypal ways of thinking about things, right? They're communicated through narrative templates, right? And that's what forms the story. And the story is the instance or the instantiation of our acting it out in the world, right? How did this happen for us? So it goes back to, sort of, Sally Joe's earlier point about, the white porcupine story just kind of happens, everybody's white porcupine story is different, except they all have the same bones, right? It's all about catching white porcupine here, right? And so, okay, yeah, I don't know that story, by the way. It sounds lovely. We'll have to make Sally tell it to us at some point. But everybody makes that narrative their own by telling it as a story, right? As an implementation or instantiation, individual to them and their experience and their conditions and their time. Because time is something that's missing. I think that you need symbolism to understand time. And when you don't have symbolism, or when you compress time down to zero, you start to lose all of these things, like the ability to see symbolically. Like a lot of people are just having discussions around, well, this, and you're here and you could be there. And it's like, okay, but you were somewhere else before. And what does that transformation look like? That's why, I like this idea. Another thing that was said, revivifying the garment of skin in modernity, right? Like, yeah, there's a revivification. Like, we have to keep going. I hate to plug it, but like Mediocrity, my live stream that I did a few weeks ago. That's what I was talking about.
I just remembered everything about the veil. Oh,
the veil was great. Tell us about the veil.
So who talked about the veil? Jonathan talked about the veil. Dr. Shaw talked about the veil.
Dr. Martin Shaw.
Oh, they all talk, because the garment is veil too. So imagine you got a thing, and you can't see it with your eyes, but it has shape and presence in a room. How do you see it? You throw something over it. So I mean, for some reason in my head, I imagine an invisible dog, because dogs have this tendency to just like lay right in front of you, so you trip over them and like get too close to you when you're not paying attention. And so like you throw a blanket over that sucker and you know where it is, you know what it's doing. That is the function of a lot of these stories. That is the function of a lot of art, because there are things beyond the scope of language that you throw something over them and it shields you from the purest reality of them in a way, but it allows you to handle them appropriately. And then you start thinking of this garment of skin that was inherited through time. That's what we had to start putting these veils between us and each other, because the realness of us and each other is too much. And that's the same with forbidden knowledge. Like, there's some stuff kids shouldn't know until an appropriate age. There's some stuff it's harmful for the mass public to know where all of our operators are overseas, because you'll get killed. Like, there's these veils, and the value of the veil and the function. I so understand it in a way that was never available to me. And I also realized probably a lot of Orthodox and Catholics have an appropriate understanding of it. And that was just something missing to me as a Protestant, because that's just not something that's discussed in that way. And so it was very, very good information.
Which is like the point about like the point of virginity and the word that we have for it and the understanding. So as soon as so virginity is something that you can't directly point towards, let's say. You can't directly see, because the moment that you see it, it's not virginity anymore. That's like that was my favorite bit when Jordan and Jonathan talked about the Theotokos, is that like you I think they said it right in the beginning when they started talking about it. Like, you can't prove it, and if you could prove it, it wouldn't be the thing anymore. Because then, like, it's like, because it's not just the physical thing, it's also like it's an attitude and a mental state. And so the way that you're like virginal is by being virginal towards the outside world, let's say. And so that's a mystery that no one is initiated into in the case of the Theotokos, and no one initiated into in marriage except your husband, obviously. And so it's like it's funny, because like the mystery is not just something that you can't see, that's hidden, and you could see if you looked. It's something that is part of being itself, as mysterious. It's totally cool. Like, I really,
it's what makes being. to some extent, is the
Mhm.
mystery. And so trying to demystify it kills it. It dissects it. It's a mistake. And I like all those points. That was great. I also wrote down that quote there. I like that. There are things beyond the scope of language. It's like, yeah, that's what we're missing. There are things beyond the scope of language. And the veil, the garments, the thing that reveals the thing that's otherwise invisible, but doesn't show it fully. That's really important because look, nobody wants to see me naked. I guess like
I mean,
zero people, right?
I
Yeah.
won't, but you'll probably find some.
Right. And having that veil makes me better, right? Like having this lighting set up, which is a pain, by the way, because lighting's almost impossible. Having this sound as good as it is, even though I know it's still a little echoey, that makes me appear better, right? And you're gonna, it's better than you are. And I'm like, no, I can assure you, I am way more interesting in person than I am online. You'd be surprised in ways that would surprise you too, for sure. Elizabeth is like that too. You get Elizabeth in person. It's like, what the heck? When it goes to 11, Elizabeth is like an 11 person. A lot of people, you meet them in person, it's like, they're not as good as they are online because they're acting or whatever. And it's like, if I'm acting when I'm online, I'm muted for sure. Much more interesting in person, for better or for worse, by the way. I'm not saying that's better.
Yeah.
It's better in some ways. And the veil allows us to not have to show our worst side, right? Or maybe to shield people from maybe not something worse, but something too good for them in the moment, right? Like maybe people shine too brightly, and having them online is all you could handle of them. And Peterson is certainly a person like that. Like, I think if I had gotten to talk to Peterson in person, I probably would have been completely overwhelmed.
I talked to him
like that kind of person.
I talked to him for like 3 or 4 minutes, not very long. That's first of all, I'd like to say for everyone who's been so angry about Adam on Twitter or whatever, that I'm 100% convinced that guy is more genuine and honest than like 99% of people you'll ever meet. And the thing that I noticed that he does is like whoever he talks to for however long, like he gives that person 100% of his attention, and it's like that's something to practice. That's yeah.
Yeah. No, I said it on my live stream on Friday, but maybe it bears repeating. There's bad things and bad people going on in the world. And if you're worried about, let's just assume it's an actual transgression on the coat of Dr. Peterson, you're the problem. I mean that very seriously. Yeah, and you can be upset for judgment or whatever. You're the problem. Okay. Yeah. We got real issues. I don't care. We got real issues. You could call out real people for doing really bad, like really, really bad things. Peterson's a good person, whatever else you may think of him. He's a good person trying to do good things. There are lots of people who are not good people, and they are deliberately trying to do bad things. Let's focus on them first, okay? And then maybe never we'll get to Peterson and his coat, because just really, scheme of the world. Let's dial it down a lot, like to 0 on that. There's plenty of bad people to criticize and to go after and to call out. Let's call out evil first. I'm a big fan of calling out evil, in case anybody didn't know. Let's call out evil, and then we'll worry about calling out, a good man who may or may not have made a wardrobe mistake, depending upon your ridiculous and probably wrong and absurd assumption about how the world
Jonathan. Jonathan had a proper breakdown of what was going on there. Just chill out. He
did a good breakdown. Yeah. No, he did a very good breakdown. I didn't like that approach. I like my approach better, where like, why are you even paying attention to the transgressions of a good man, even if they're real? Like, even if it was real.
I mean, so I think that it's necessary to, like, I think the way that Jonathan says it is like to protect our mysteries, like to keep the things that are holy. I think that's generally a good thing to try to do. I think that we also need to have some leeway, like when it comes to this kind of stuff. When I converted, I did some things in public that were like, now looking back at it, at least wrong. But I wasn't aware of it, and I'm pretty happy that no one like in bad faith called me out, and just gave me the time to figure that out myself and then stop. That's it's like, and that guy he didn't even to orthodoxy. To Sanji is asking to orthodoxy, and so and he's not converted to like either Catholicism or Orthodoxy. He's just someone who's like really trying to wrestle with the idea of God and to try to come close to him. And I think the worst thing that you can do is then go there and what do you say, rain on his parade or something like that?
Yeah.
We got artworks like Piss Christ out there, and nobody's smashing that with a bat.
Right.
Yeah.
So what the hell? Because
we've got the Satanic Temple putting things in state houses, and you're worried about. Come on, like you need a little relevance realization there to pull out a Vervaeke term. You need to kind of get your priorities straight in the world. Like there's some bad actors doing bad stuff, and Peterson's not a bad actor, and he's not doing bad stuff. He's helping people left, right, and center. Let's focus on that.
And I mean the worst stick people 5-year-old drawing that is willing to positively associate themselves with Christ is not the problem.
Right, for sure. Exactly.
What do you want? You want people not to positively associate themselves with Christ? Because that seems like hiding, and it's gross, and it makes me sick, and you're coward.
And you're not representing religion or your religion or religion as such very well. When you're assaulting somebody who isn't in your club and saying you've transgressed the rules of the club that you're not in, this is not a really good strategy. This is sort of like the problem of the left in general, I would say. I don't subscribe to your rules, so the fact that I'm transgressing them means nothing to me. Good luck to you. But yeah, I don't want to harp too much on that. There were some sort of incidents that were, I don't want to say disappointing, but didn't go as well as I thought they could have. And I did want to address that. But first, I did want to mention one of the things that I think it was Jonathan Majot said this: trust makes everything out of nothing. I was just like that, like obviously right. Oh, I'm going to get out my phone and put it right back. But I got it out and wrote that one down. And I think it was the same talk too. He said, we're all serving in one temple or another. And I thought that was just a whopping note. Like, yes, we're all serving in one temple or another. And yes, trust makes everything out of nothing. These are very important sorts of concepts that I don't think we're sort of accounting for. And they do have a depth to them. Right. And that's sort of the problem. And the other thing that was said was trade tyranny for depth. Right. And then after that, Martin Shaw says myth is the wildest, deepest way of telling the truth. It's like, yes, all of these are true and important. This is all for me about re-enchanting the world, or re-inflating things, getting off of that flat world, getting out of this equality doctrine garbage and back to some things are more important than others. Peterson's wardrobe, not important. Actual evil, really important, right? Watching people on YouTube, not quite so important, although watch me, because why not? Right? Actually going to Symbolic World Summit and meeting people, very important, right? Like actually being in person with people, doing things in community, in communitas, if you want to call it some fancy Vervaeke words, right? That's actually important. Right. And getting out there and doing this stuff is supremely important. And that's what I found, really useful about the summit. The one sort of incident that happened, I don't know, do you want to go into this, Sally? Do you want to go into what's your take on this?
I don't know.
Do it.
All right. We'll do it again. I kind of hinted at this in my live stream anyway, so I'll go over it. There was a Q&A. I think it was on the last day. John Hurst did an excellent job the whole time. He did a really good job. So, and I'll just tell the story from my perspective, and then Sally can jump in with her perspective, and then Adam can cry about having left early. and then two more. We'll get your take. I don't know how much of this you noticed, or where you were even at the time, whatever. So where there was a question for the big panel at the end and a Q&A, and I got up and walked to, because I had been working on, and Father Eric sitting there needling me. You got to point them in this direction, and I'm like, well, and I have I have an agenda, that's for sure, right? I'm a meaning crisis guy. I don't like the Christianese. That's what I like about Peterson, and there wasn't a lot of Christianese in the Symbolic World Summit. So I'm not criticizing it for that, but had there been, fair enough. Who cares?
Excuse me, 1 second. Christianese? Are you talking about my church?
Yes.
Okay.
The whole Christian language idea, right? Peterson's very good at speaking secular, and Jonathan Michaud's pointed this out before. He has a way of speaking to secular people, right? That the Christians can't do for whatever reason, right? For whatever reason, I don't want to get into that here. But yeah, I mean, I came up with a formulation that was sort of dense enough that I could put it into a question and point at something that I actually wanted an answer to. I did not get a chance at any point to ask my question, by the way. No fault of anyone. So I'm not mad or anything. It just, things happen. Not a big deal. So I got up and I walked. I was in the back. We were in the second to last row or something. I was walking along. It's a big auditorium, right? And I get passed by this person in a skirt. Now, you can object to my characterization, but if you're not Scottish and it's not a ceremony, it's not a kilt. Okay, you're not allowed to wear a kilt whenever you feel like it because you want to wear a kilt. I'm sorry, you're not a man. Sorry, it's not a manly thing to do. And so he's running like full speed, and he's a tall guy with long legs. He jets right past me, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of, what are you doing? Like it's a crowded auditorium too. It's not like we had a lot of extra space. There were a lot of people like up against the where the cameras were, just kind of sitting down with their feet out or whatever, which is fine. Who cares? It's, why not? And he's running through, and he jumps like 2 or 3 people in the line because he ran. And I was like, well, that's a little weird. Whatever, I'm just whatever. I'm just there to ask a question and maybe do some attention pointing at an issue that's important to me. Right. And I get in line, and it's taking, the questions are really good at first, but it's taking a little while. And it becomes apparent to John Hers that we're only on time for like 2 or 3 more questions. And he looked at me because I was the cutoff. And I'm like, oh, that's cool, dude. And he goes, I'll make it up to you. And I'm like, John, don't worry about that, please. Like, don't worry about that. It's not a big deal. It's not that important. Right? It's just not the overall scheme of things, whatever. And I'm like, it's cool. And then he notices a woman behind me. Right? And I didn't see her. She was behind me. Well, I'm looking forward. And he says, oh, you got cut off in that last Q&A and blah, 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 blah. And I sensed, he was pretty hurt by it. And I sensed a transgression had happened. So I said to him, yeah, throw one of them out of line and put her in. And he's like looking at me like, wait, what? And I was like, throw them out, throw someone out, put her in. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know who this woman is. Like, I don't know there was a transgression, but he seemed to think so. I'm like, take charge, do the right thing. You're the MC, like, take control. And, I was like, I'm out of here, guys. I know I'm not going to get my question. It's fine, whatever. And then skirt person does his quote question, and it's not a question. First of all, he goes into his prophetic vision about if the Orthodox Church and Catholic Church were biblical brothers, which ones would they be? And at first I thought this, and then I thought that, and then, and I'm just like, dude, this isn't about your prophetic vision. Let's just like ask a simple, quick question that can be answered. And he was very dramatic. He like jumped into the camera. You can see it on the videos if you have access to the video. You can see him jump in. And it's like, what are you doing? Why are you putting spotlight on yourself in that way? And that was no good. And Q&As in general. Look, Matt. I get your point. Q&As are hard, and Q&As have gotten harder, right, over the years. And actually, that's something that I want to touch on later. But and I will, because I think it's germane to the intimacy crisis in general, right? Is why Q&As are suddenly a mess. I think it's all the same problem. So what ended up happening was that woman who had been transgressed against got the last question. I think Nate Heil was standing in front of me. He sat down. I don't know what happened there. I just know he sat down. Good for him. Thank you, Nate. Let her have her thing, whatever it was. And she ended up on stage. Interesting thing if you watch, because I did rewatch this, mostly to see Skirt Person and her again. They couldn't quite hear her when she was talking because she was too close to the speaker and she had a bit of an accent and she was a little meek, right? But once they sort of brought her towards the stage, watch, Martin Shaw gets out of his chair. And then she's able to sit down. And if you listen closely, when she's up on stage, her voice is steady, she's louder, and that's not audio. That's her projection, because she was more confident, because she felt safe and comfortable, right? She wasn't apart. She was brought up on the stage. And that was a lovely moment, I thought, that wouldn't have happened. And then, Sally, now you have to tell your part of Skirt Person, and how you felt about that whole thing. Because I think your message and the way you put forth about, we'll say, the lack, such as it is, the conference was wonderful. No criticism, I promise you. Go ahead, Sally. Tell us how you dealt with Skirt Person.
So I was sitting in the row, and Mark had got up to answer his question, and I'm paying attention to stuff because I pay attention to stuff differently, to say the best, than other people. And I see legs start running across the room, and legs I've been watching for a while because reasons, and I see him start running, and I think to myself, oh, I should throw a chair at his legs. But then I was like, oh, that's probably inappropriate at a conference. And so I see him run past the girl, and then Mark, and other people. And I'm kind of seething pissed already. And I'm not just pissed at him, right? I'm pissed at every man who let him do it. Because as soon as he started running, you're done. You're done. That's it. Sit down. Go away. Anyway, and so then he's up and he starts into this, and like, I swear to God, the way I heard it was, I heard, I'm a prophet, but I guess that wasn't verbally said. But I was so annoyed with this, and I was so annoyed with everyone just sitting for it. I could not just stand there. So I got up and went and had to sit in the restroom and was refreshed, as one is. And then as I'm coming back, he's done with his prophetic notions. And I see him once again walking much too fast for the room. And so I stood directly in front of him and made him stop. And I told him he was ignorant and arrogant, and he had just passed sick old men, and someone should tell him that that's what it was. And then I went and sat down. But it really, I wish people could see that it would not only be all right, but also beneficial to people that are having those kind of discernment struggles. Because in spite being able to basically tell him off, it doesn't exactly fill me with glee. It's quite sad. And it's mostly sad that I would need to, because much, much earlier in his life, people have cheated him many, many, many times for him to think that was appropriate. And it's sad for society as a whole, because in fact, he was beautiful. And just to be disciplined enough to look the way he did is something of merit, just by itself, just all alone. And it's tragedy. Right.
Well, and I want to point out to everybody that Sally is 5'2". This guy was 6 something. All right. Sally's a tiny little slip of a thing. and yeah, she's the one, like, I got to excuse myself because I didn't even see him coming. Like, he just flew past me from behind me, and I was, what just happened, and Adam's upset because he'd like to think he would have gotten up there and done something.
I hope I would have. Okay, all right. I was sitting in Tampa International Airport, like beside some Freemasons or something during all of this, having a pretty boring time. I was eating some Haribo. I hope if I were there, I'd at least say sit down or ask a question. Because there were a couple of guys, right, who, fair enough, they were younger guys, kind of closer to my age, even a little bit older, who were kind of having a hard time getting their questions out, a little bit more introspective. I think to a large extent that's going to happen. I've been to conferences before like that, and sometimes you do get that, but there's a difference.
Here's the other essential feature too. This wasn't the last Q&A. This was the second to last Q&A.
Right.
Correct.
And because of this, and because not taking authority, because not pinning this down, they do written questions.
Right.
Basically is punishing the whole because you're not secure enough to punish the singular. And I don't think that was appropriate.
Right. No, that's a good point. So I remember you saying that. I want to go through some quick stuff here, and then I want to say something about this, and then two more. I want to get your opinion afterward. But let me just quickly, Nancy, it's good to see you. I didn't realize we would watch the live stream. It's lovely. It was lovely to see you again at this other event. It was so hard to watch the Q&A. The skirt person was overly dramatic. Yes, exactly. And Matt, I did want to address this. Nate gave his question to her. Good for Nate. He's a man. So he could ask in person later. He wasn't looking for attention. Exactly. Kilt guy, Matt, it's skirt person. Was surrounded by dialogue party after the Q&A, and he got the attention he requested. That's unfortunate. Manuel goes Sally. Excellent. Sally is 100% correct. Right. Yes, Adam went to the conference. He did. So I want to just quickly two more. I'm sorry. I want to quickly frame something, and then I want to get your opinion on how much of this you saw, right, and what your opinion is. But before I do that, I want to point out a few things. There is a famous psychologist who is very good at most things, like Freud's got his problems, Jung's got his problems, right? B.F. Skinner. And B.F. Skinner, as a psychologist, posited this positive only feedback theory, which he then subsequently disproved by trying to make it work about 1 billion times in 1 billion different ways, in 1 billion different settings with mice and with all kinds of creatures and with humans. And his son tried to get it. It's called Walden, is the experiment, which is ironic. Don't get me started on Thoreau and Walden. And Walden, too, was his son. It doesn't work to give people only positive feedback. Okay. If you have 2 brain cells, actually 2 neurons in your head, and you understand anything about the basic principles of this vaunted evolution you guys all yap about, you will realize the only important feedback in an evolutionary model is negative. Positive feedback is totally optional, not required in an evolutionary framework. I happen to believe that evolution is true for the most part. That's important to know. Society has adopted this idea of positive feedback being more important than negative feedback, and the idea that negative feedback is in fact bad. This is exactly backwards, and that's why Sally's upset. And I obviously echo her sentiment on this. We need to give people negative feedback. They need that. They need to know when they transgressed and how badly. I've said this before. I will say it again. I have many times, especially when I was younger, backhanded people. Flat out backhanded them. No warning either, because they pissed me off and they needed to know how badly they had transgressed. Years later, almost all of these people, I'm not making this up, have thanked me and said independently, I didn't know how annoying I was being. And that really, put me in a position where I could think about that. This is important. It is important to explain to people when they are transgressing and how badly, so that they can adjust their behavior. Because without negative feedback, you won't adjust your behavior. That is the end of my soapbox. 2 more. What did you think of that whole incident? I'm assuming you were there and saw at least some of it. So what was your perspective? Because you have a different perspective from us for sure.
Okay, give me a little bit of leeway, because I'm still trying to figure out how I saw the whole thing. So my first my initial reaction was annoyance and embarrassment. I have to say that. But I tried to step back from, as it was happening, I tried to step back from that, because I'm not. I think that it takes courage to go up and ask questions,
Yes.
especially at an event like that, especially with people like that that you know maybe you've been looking up to or something. And so I tried to, on that end, especially cut him some slack, because I didn't go up. Like there were things technically that I would have wanted to ask. They were questions that would make more sense to ask, like when you're sitting in a smaller circle, but still. But I didn't, and so I thought, okay, so he has the courage to ask. And then I don't think that I fully grasped the thing that he was trying to get at, and the way that I understood it in the end was something, and I'm being biased as an Orthodox here, but was from my perspective as a Catholic, there's probably some things when you're involved in the symbolic world, there's probably some things that you have to try and reconcile with your tradition and with the tradition that you're technically getting involved in. And what he was asking, like the two brothers and the what like the lungs of the church or the lungs of Christianity or something like that, like to me that doesn't make too much sense, to be honest, because from my perspective, the Catholic Church is a heretical sect that broke off from the body of Christ. Like, no offense at all, but that's how we see it. And so it seemed to me that what he was doing there was maybe asking for attention. I don't know, but like trying to find a way to reconcile those things and then get approval from the figures that he had been listening for such a long time to validate his attempt at reconciling these things. And I think that it's not the proper place to do so. I think that is something that I would do privately. And if I had to have the input of Jonathan or any of the other people there, then I try to get to them privately in some sense, like maybe send an email, or maybe become a patron and then get one of the the sessions that you can get with the speakers where you have like half an hour time to ask them stuff, like anything like that, to reconcile those things. And so yeah, I think that it was just not the proper place to do it. I think you have to also take into account that maybe he is quite, I don't know, it seemed confused to me. And so he probably is confused in his way of thinking, one way or the other. And so obviously the question is going to be confused as well. So I would cut him slack on there as well. But yeah, I also think that it's possible that I'm maybe cutting too much slack here. Is I have no insight in his personal life. I have no idea what's going on with that guy. Like there was this other, I don't know if anyone saw this, but like a few years back, Peterson was having a talk and then some guy ran on stage and like broke down on stage. And like people were quick to judge that guy. But that was someone who I think it turned out later, like who was like having real problems going on. And he just grasped for the straw that was Peterson at that time. And so it's possible that that was like a similar situation there as well. And so, yeah, I didn't enjoy the whole thing. I would have wanted for other people to ask their questions that were actually questions. I also felt like secondhand embarrassment. But yeah, and that made it hard to watch as well. But that's I really want to point that that's a personal thing of mine. That's not an objective assessment of the situation.
No.
It was just like
I think actually you outdid us, and we've been practicing. So thank you for that. Yeah, I think you nicely framed everything. So the incident with Peterson on stage, that was at Liberty University talk, by the way. Thank you, memory. Sometimes my memory works. I'm very happy.
Bad.
That was Liberty University. Yeah, he was very disturbed, young man. I think it could have been some of that going on. I think you touched better than Sally did. Sorry, Sally. On Sally's point, the wasted potential of somebody who was brave enough to go up, who was, able to try and do that, and the wasted potential that society has wasted by not teaching him how to ask a concise, clear question, or knowing that he didn't have one. Like, that's a skill too, right? Like I said, I'm being encouraged. Get up there, Mark. Get up there. And I'm like, look. I need time to figure out how to frame this in this venue, right? Because I get if I were sitting with Peugeot for like an hour or two, there'd be some stuff going. I'd be doing all kinds of stuff, right? And it's like, I need minimal framing. I need to get to the question quickly, right? But I'm aware of that. People haven't been given that skill, and that's a real a real problem for me. But I like the way you framed it better. I'm a little upset that Sally and I have been talking about this since it happened. You did a better summary.
I'd like to like one more thing. Then I totally agree with Sally. I think that she's right, and it's an aspect that is necessary to shine light on. I personally, Marvin, mostly don't feel comfortable at the time to make that kind of judgment, because I don't think I'm in that aspect. I don't think I'm figured out enough to judge that in other people properly. And so I'm glad that Sally did it.
Here's the difference. So the Liberty University thing, this thing, we're sacrificing the center for the fringe, and it is irresponsible. I wouldn't have let the Liberty University thing happen either. I have a massive different opinion on how that was handled. And this is not because I don't also have empathy for the person. Like, I have no malice to that person. Like, I really do have like a sadness about it. But just because you have a sadness, just because you have toxic empathy, does not mean you should allow it. Yeah. It's a disservice to the whole, and it makes for danger. It makes really intense danger, and some people should be protected at a cost to people struggling sometimes. It has to be.
Yeah, pretty much. I think if this had happened in Ireland, your man would be made fun of, and I would also make fun of him. and it's not to push him down. It's actually just to send the signal: this is inappropriate, and what you're doing is actually laughable. What are you doing, right? Do you not want that response? Then don't do that again.
Yeah, that negative feedback in a kind way, because laughter is a kind way of giving negative feedback instead of backhanding them, which I still prefer. So and I want to address some of this stuff. So Matt C. Peugeot said that God means some good productive purpose about the schisms. Yeah, I disagree with him on that. The Peterson sphere, and I'm sure that's what you meant to type, Matt, should talk about that. No, that's all they talk about. And they don't talk about it, right? They just do it. Schism. Oh, I mean, we're going to have 10 more people start up YouTube channels that I can't watch. Well, that's a good idea. That's really helpful. Let's spread out all the talent so it can't do anything useful ever. What a wonderful strategy. Haven't we had enough of that? Like, isn't that the problem? I mean, really, at some point. Nancy, but if you are taking the attention of a group of people, you have a responsibility. Nancy, I have a live stream on responsibility. I'm just saying, to add to their experience. I agree. Skirt person was very self-orient by calling attention to himself and not on topic. I agree. And to be fair, again, I don't think he knew. I don't think he knew. And that's the problem. Sanji, when Mark talks, he's everything but conscious. Okay. Thanks. I'm not concise. I gotcha. I'm the most concise speaker you could ever hope to talk to when I want to be. But I'm trying to talk to you people who don't understand anything about the world. I'm so confused. Why don't you see these things? Yeah. So I want to talk sort of greater about, and this will be somewhat self-serving. If I ever have the resources, which boy, I don't have resources to feed myself, but if I ever had the resources, I want to do a cafe, and in the cafe, I want to do YouTube things, because I see this, this sort of I don't want to call it a progression. I don't want to call it an evolution, but a change towards this formation, right? Where we went from TED Talks, which are people blabbing at you about their idiotic, mostly. Some of TED Talks are very good, but like tiny number, idiotic theses, right? Just spewing them out at you. Then we went to the more long form conversational style, right? And then we went to like the Joe Rogan, people talking to other people, and that watching sense making, watching distributed cognition. And I think the next step in that is to have people join in on the conversation in a healthy way. And part of that would be having a cafe with a stage in the back, with people like one remote, maybe two local, whatever, right? Having a conversation and involving the audience in a Q&A. And some of this is inspired by this guy you may or may not have heard of, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. When I went to see him in Charlotte a billion years ago.
Is that another one of these Canadians? I can't stand them.
Yeah.
They're awful.
I hate Canadians. French Canadians are not Canadians. They're French Canadians.
Which is
God's
worse.
Chosen people. God's chosen people for sure. But yeah, the regular Canadians, they're not good. When I was at Charlotte, what they did was it's a huge venue. I forget how many people were there. It's 4,000, 5,000, 7,000. I don't know. It was a lot. It's a big stadium. They had an app, and you put your question into the app, and someone curated the questions, and he answered the top 10. And I was like, somebody curating your question is a good idea. Working with you one-on-one to say, what question do you want to ask and how do you ask it? And doing that up front. And I thought, like, man, having a little cafe where you could do that would be kind of cool. Thank you, Nancy. The app is Slido. Yeah, I couldn't remember the name off the top of my head. So I appreciate that. That I thought was cool, but having somebody do it, like work with you one-on-one, so that when you get up to ask your question, you actually know how to ask a question. Now you're doing what I would call education. I have 2 videos on education. One's called Education and Training. It's about a year old. Go check it out on Navigating Patterns. Right. That's the difference between education and training, right? Like actually giving you a skill that John Vervaeke would say is exaptable, right? That you can use in other places. How to formulate your thoughts, taking the time. We went into time earlier in this stream, right? Having a space to formulate your thoughts and gather them, and then being able to engage with other people with them instead of just spewing your thoughts willy-nilly in like a therapy session. Not a big fan of therapy. A lot of what goes on the internet in certain spaces in particular is just therapy. It's just people blabbing out whatever's in their head, and they're going, oh, it's so pretty. It's like, I don't want to hear about your problems that your father's better than you, or, you know, how somebody handled the death of a relative and you're still obviously struggling with it. I just don't care about that because I don't know you. I don't know you. If I know you, it's a whole different story. Like if I know you, then let's have a private conversation about it. Happy to help. Spewing it out over the internet, even with somebody else, I don't think that's healthy. Like and it's not that it's not healthy for that person. I don't think it's healthy for everybody watching. That's where the problem is. And one of the things I do like about Pastor Paul Vanderklay, shout out to Pastor Paul Vanderklay, my good friend, Pastor Paul Vanderklay, the randos conversations he has that he doesn't publish, probably the best thing he does. Probably in terms of what he can do without being there. And I think that's actually super important. That sort of interaction where you do have that, because I mean, I hate psychology. I actually hate it. First of all, it's simple and banal. I just find it like too easy to be made into anything important or even named. Right? I'm like, yeah, this is how people are. You see them every day. Get over it. But also, like, there is an importance to being able to talk to somebody. In some cases, somebody you don't know, right? And tell them things in a way where you don't feel like you're being judged by the things they know about you. Like, I think actually there's a thing there. So I'm not down on that sort of aspect of therapy, if you can think of it that way. But therapy in general, I'm very skeptical of. I like what Catherine Wilson, she put on the Thunder Bay conference. I like what she said, which is if we had, healthy churches and healthy pastors, basically, although I imagine priests too, we wouldn't need therapists. I agree. Therapy would go away completely. That, by the way, is what she does. So she's saying, like, I want my job to go away because the church is doing their job better. Yeah, okay, I'm all in on that message. That sounds like a good message to me. And I think that's actually super, super important. I did want to go over this, and then I'll jump back into you guys here. Matt C. Martin Shaw said his school is mainly about reprogramming students so they're not obsessed about being heard. Yeah. No, that's a good point, Matt. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's really important. You don't want to get caught up with people who are obsessed with being heard for themselves.
It's such a weird thing though nowadays, because we have on one hand we have this unbelievable emotional incontinence.
Right.
Doesn't matter who said it, but it's a good term for it. Where it's like you have to tell everyone everything about yourself, and have the attention centered on you. But on the other hand, and in the same space, funnily enough, we have people being heavily isolated. And so I think that there is a necessity for being heard or being seen, but it's something that usually would take place in your own little, in your family, in your friend, in your immediate surroundings,
community.
And so in your community, right? And so you'd have it's, how do you say it? It's I think we need to learn how to listen to people again, and we need to learn how to properly. That's why I admire Peterson for his ability to, he talks to someone for a minute, but he's soaking up everything that person says, at least seemingly so. And so that is something that we need to learn, because it is important to be seen. You perish otherwise. But on the other hand, then this, I think that this lack is also what causes the narcissistic obsession with it, which is as harmful, just on the other extreme, let's say.
Right. Well, I wanted to grab this quote. This was Martin Shaw for sure. He said he likes things that allow people to reveal themselves without the use of the word I. And that just floored me. It floored me so much. I actually took my phone out and wrote it down. Right. I was like, yes, that's very much what we're talking about. Right. So if you look at Skirt Person, I had a dream. It's my question. Right. And yeah, Martin Shaw is not a fan. Right. He wants you to reveal yourself without using the word I. And I just thought that was that for me was just like nuclear weapon in my head sort of stuff. I was like, that's great. That's so useful.
There's a very particular kind of emotional botulism that happens when you think about your own state and only state, and you don't get oxygen to your thoughts. And this is about the hello, it's a nice day, how's the weather? You have to be having some relationships past that. And if you're not, then you're only having relationship with yourself and you don't know where you're at. And that's what I mean by that, because it's just you're feeding on your own. It's about how you're seeing, because you're only seeing things from your own perspective, and then how you imagine the outside world just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. But when you make direct contact with another person who sees it differently, they actually have to break down your hallucinations about the world.
Right.
I lost where I was going with that. But
no, that's fine, Sally. So I'll have to do the shameless plug for the Navigating Patterns channel. I talk a lot about orientation, right? If what you're trying to do is take, say, a philosophical text, particularly reprehensible, unless it's Plato or Aristotle or something before that, but anything after is garbage, and yourself, your own experience, and navigate the world, you can't. Technically, navigation doesn't work that way. You need orientation. You need a third point.
Well,
And you probably need a fourth and a fifth, but you need at least 3 points to orient and navigate in a three-dimensional world, which is the world that we live in. Check out Navigating Patterns if you haven't already.
That's why I'm hooked on the hallucination word, Mark, because people are trying to use drugs and hallucination to be their third point.
Yes.
And actually, you just need anybody that's not you.
Exactly. No, that's a really good point, Sally. I like that. Boy, you're just full of stuff. I've been writing down your quotes left, right, and center today. No, that's right. They have this, like, people have this dichotomy right now. I noticed it in that talk I referenced earlier that Manuel made me watch, for which I will never forgive him. There was a lot of this chatter about the me, beyond the me, and it's like you're referencing yourself twice, and yet saying you're outside of yourself, and as a justification for growing or changing or being able to do something, so that you're not possessed, or maybe you're possessed by the thing beyond you. That's really you. This kind of talk is not healthy, right? People very much need something outside of themselves and they know it, but they want to control it. So that's drugs. That's what, right? There's the materialism. I'm going to take this material. It's going to give me an experience that I couldn't have without it, an experience, quote, beyond me, outside of myself, right? And then that's going to, right? And yeah, if you, I would say, probably misread or at all read Hegel. Hegel's an idiot. I'm sorry. It just, like,
he's a smart
honestly,
idiot.
guys,
A smart idiot.
I don't think so. He's an articulate idiot. But like,
Okay.
the stuff he's talking about, really, come on, at a certain point, right? So he gives you
Just
that
go to
sense
church.
that that's possible. I mean, he justifies it, right? He gives you a way to justify it. And Hegel wasn't a philosopher. I think if you called him a philosopher, he'd probably punch you out. He's a theologian. Nobody respected philosophers when Hegel was alive. Nobody. And just to let you know,
As they shouldn't.
Right? They had the proper relationship, unlike us, to philosophers, which is actors, philosophers,
musicians.
I don't know. I'm warming up to musicians too more. I'm warming up.
Don't do too much. Don't do
not too much. Not too. I'm looking forward to wisdom waves, though. That's I'm hoping we can make that a thing. Yeah, like when artists revivify the world, which would be great, or help us to reclaim the symbolic image, it's fine. When you have people taking theology, reducing it in scientific language to philosophy, you have a destruction of the world, right? You're flattening things down, because I would say theology is the thing that opens things up, right? It does that reciprocal opening that John Vervaeke talks about. And philosophy is actually the polar opposite. I mean, the idea of ontology, not ontology as being, although everybody equivocates on those words, ontology is categorization. That's a flattening of the world, guys. A flattening of the world can be useful for certain things. I'm still a big science guy on the real science, not follow the science, not some former head of the FDA science who's the science, like actual scientific method science, more like Thomas Edison, who had a fourth grade education science. Do the work, find the thing. That has its uses, but it also has its limitations. And the one thing that's missing in the world, and the one thing that I think, you two more and Sally in particular emphasized with Skirt Person, we don't have the negative feedback. We don't have the sense of limitation. We don't have the sense of constraint in the world. And that's causing us to try and do things that we can't do. There's just things you can't do. You can't erase gender. It's not going to work. Like, I get it. You can carve up your body and do horrible things to it, but it's not going to work. Like, and it may seem to work for a little while, right? Because we're compressing time. Look, I did it for 10 seconds and then I got wiped out. It's not going to work long term.
It's pretty bigoted of you.
I'm surprised you didn't jump all over this, and I thought of it and then I forgot. Now I've remembered again. If you didn't know any of the words in the question, how would you feel about the whole subject? From the legs person? Yes. Because the transgression actually isn't necessarily as much the stumbly question and the inability to get to the point or any of that. For me, it was all of everything before that.
Right.
And why doesn't anybody, like, why people are very concerned about like the question and the empathy for the question. And even at one point, somebody's like, oh, it's a good question. Oh, it wasn't a good question. But the thing is like, if you're just looking at the action, like, why is the action less important than the proposition?
Right. Right. Well, and that's very much, I talk about that in my tweets on the age of gnosis all the time on my Twitter handle.
I'm
really
dumb. Can you
kinda
explain
right.
that? Excuse me. Can you explain that?
For the adult male who ran like a 5-year-old across the back and pushed, like he didn't quite push and shove, but it was the adult equivalent of pushing and shoving to get his way. I don't care what's asked after that.
Right. 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 And yeah, I focus on this again on my Twitter, right? Like, we prefer our you know.
And so the reason I bring that up is because when people are talking about him, they're talking about what he said in
Right. And not what he did and not how it came to be.
Right.
Right. We're preferring the propositions that were proffered to the observation of what happened. And that's age of gnosis for me, right? That's would be, people would say modernity. I would say, no, modernity is a garbage word. Don't use it. I have a video on that on Navigating Patterns, of course I do, right? The proper framing is age of gnosis, where we're preferring these propositions to the actual event. Like, it's one thing to say I care. It's another thing to not shoot the person dead. Like, and we're not listening. We're not listening. There's so many people that do that. They actually kill people. And they're like, no, I care about people. And then they murder somebody. It's like, you were listening to them. Why did you believe them? Their actions could have told you more than their words. But you were preferring the words.
Peterson really brought this up for me of like, what you dress is an intense signal. And I didn't like it when I first heard it, right? Because I'm like dress pants averse. I'm definitely formal wear averse. Like, I'm not from that. But after a lot of thinking about it, seeing it in context, the people who are going to act out, the people who are going to be a problem, I would say 80% of the time told you and you didn't hear them because they wore spikes or they wore inappropriate things and they were disheveled in a way that was unbecoming of the situation. Now, granted, this isn't like everybody in jeans and sloppy t-shirt is wrong, right? But maybe everybody in jeans and a sloppy t-shirt at church is wrong. Like, this isn't everybody in a suit is correct. Because I tell you what, somebody in a suit, like at a lumber yard, I'm thinking mafia, I'm thinking danger town. Like, so this is a context thing. But if you're intentionally, openly, and pushing, I'm out of context and I like it, you're probably going to act a fool.
Right. No, it's good. It's good, Sally. Yeah, there's an important signal in the way you dress. There's an important signal in the way you carry yourself. There's an important signal in the intonation in your voice. If those signals don't match, that's what we need to pay attention to. That, for me, is part of
and like
reclaiming the cosmic image.
I thought a lot about what I was going to wear to the symbolic world. And I had a number of ways I could go. Because, like, I like a lot of traditional things. I also like being Western. But I decided to dress as though I was going to do business because I'm a married woman and I was going there without my husband. And in spite the fact I could have looked more traditionally feminine, which maybe I appreciate, I chose not to. I was like, nah, I think business wear makes sense for me in this case, in this situation, for my intent, because I am here to do business. And that was really intentional. And like, kind of just wanted to wear jeans, kind of just wanted to wear, I'm in Florida stuff. You know, because I get hot and it's Florida. Yeah. It's hot. But no, I decided business wear was the appropriate wear to do what I wanted to do. And so you got to ask yourself when you see somebody, like there were some people there in very artsy clothes. And I think it was appropriate because they were artists meeting other artists at an artist thing. Made sense. Totally. Yeah. Could have went that way. Like, you know, and so but the amount to where we have people crawling college campuses in down with the man shirts, and then people are all like surprised when they're burning stuff and hitting people and acting like they don't care about the rules. It's like,
Right. No, that's ridiculous. No, well, Emmanuel, if you don't fit in, you either cannot or don't want to. Right. And that's an important signal. And I like Nancy was there. Nancy. Most people did not see him until he got in line. Right. Most people didn't. Well, most people didn't see him until he jumped in front of the camera.
Understand that. How can you not see the 6'3" man
He
who
was
is
in the back. He ran in the back. To be fair.
I don't know. I saw him a bunch. But anyway.
Yeah, you're more attentive. You're one of those crazy artist people, so that makes more sense. But I think and I think that's really important. Like we're really missing a sense for curation of these people and this understanding that all of these little pieces, all these little signals together matter. And it sort of goes back to what we were saying in the beginning. The filter of the tickets are expensive. And the venue is kind of, far away. I mean, it's not Tarpon Springs is not near the Tampa airport. It's 35 or 45 minutes away. This is not like you get off the plane and you can take a subway train or whatever into the venue, or the venues at the airport, which, we could have done that any number of cities. You actually had to get to the airport and travel 45 minutes to get to a hotel that was close enough to Tarpon Springs. Tarpon Springs, I did not stay in Tarpon Springs. I stayed down the street. It wasn't far away. Tarpon Springs is ridiculously expensive to get a hotel. And I don't mind sharing with roaches, so I was okay. Adam had no choice. Sally's never going to forgive me. That's okay. But we were there in some sense to do business. But and I think that's the right attitude, Sally. Like, bring your attitude, in your dress. We were bringing this dog-headed book, this lovely little dog-headed book that we have, and we haven't made them yet. We're going to put them up for sale. I don't know if we're going to sell them. Hopefully, we can sell them through the Symbolic World Press. I got to talk to Richard Rowland and or Jonathan Michaud about that. That would be great. Well, it would be nice that we have a bigger version. We had a much bigger version. But we were there to represent the Peterson Sphere ethos, right? We were there to learn from these people who have a very specific agenda that, again, like I'm adjacent. I'm in there. I read the Symbolic World chat on Facebook. Like I'm in the Facebook group, right? I keep an eye on these guys. I love Jonathan Michaud's work. I love all those people. I've talked to JP Marceau for hours and hours. He's awesome. I get to meet him in person. It was awesome. Thanks, JP. It's good to see you. I'd love to talk more with him. Never enough time to talk to all the people you want to. But we were there to interact with people. We were there to experience what was going on. We were there to see a healthy, successful structure make the world a better place. And with the idea that we're trying to reclaim the cosmic image. We're serious. We know what we're doing. We've got a plan. We're coming together. We're using music. We're getting a bunch of artists. Oh, well, everything's got a flaw. And a bunch of history people together, right? And we're going to manifest this stuff. And like one of the interactions too that I want to highlight was meeting Eamon, who was great. Really love meeting Eamon. I hope you see this. We got to talk more about the virtue cards and that project. Just meeting these people with these talents that you don't even know what talents are in the world. Like, you don't know what people can be good at. Like, you have no idea, right? And meeting these people with these talents that you've never even thought of, right? Or talents that you've never considered or whatever. And then really experiencing what they're like and what they can do, what they can bring to the table, how rich the world is with skills and skill sets that you've probably never considered in your life that could be skills or skill sets. That was really rich for me. And everything about the conference was just next level. I was blown out. I'm glad that Father Eric was staying later and had the idea that I could drive him around as a chauffeur for a few days. That was really helpful, actually. We went to the beach and got sunburned. It was fantastic. So that whole interaction, even though it was really very overwhelming for me, still recovering, guys. That was really important. And having those sorts of experience, even though there's sort of high contrast and you need contrast to see, so I'm still a fan, is positive. And it's positive in a positive direction. And I think we need more of that. I mean, Thunder Bay, I made that a much bigger adventure than it was, which was fantastic for me. So you all didn't get as good an adventure as I did, driving out to South Dakota, seeing Sally, getting the initial run of Doghead books and giving them out at the conference. She didn't get to do it this one, whatever problems, reasons. That those sorts of experiences are important because they, again, reciprocally open up your life, and they allow you to enhance the skill of doing the thing that would be required to reclaim the cosmic image. That's the thing that I focus more on, is this poetic knowledge. 1998, this guy wrote this, 1998. This poetic way of knowing, this poetic way of informing the world that enables you to see the richness, the fullness, the depth of it. And another quote that I wanted to highlight: awe is the ability to see something larger than yourself. Yes. And I like what John Vervaeke said this years ago. He said there's an axis of awe and horror. And so how you see something, right? If you're opening up to it, you see it as awe. And if you're closed off, or you see it as horror, right? So if it's reciprocally narrowing, it's horrifying. But if it's reciprocally opening, it's awe-inspiring. As in,
that's basically our idea of hell as well. It's like, it's the love of God, and either you're open to it and it's a magnificent experience, or you're not open to it and then it's burning. So it's
yeah, and I thought that was that was an interesting comment. And then also I've got, compulsion without discipline means you have no drive. I believe that was Sally Jo herself who said that. Right, and that was based on Jonathan Peugeot talking about, if you think you want to be an artist, don't. And then his second piece of advice was also don't. And his third piece of advice was, wait for it, don't. And then he said, if you are compelled and you pick up your pencil every day, then maybe. Right? But expect to be poor. I was like, yes, that is the message that artists need to hear the most, is that it's suffering all the way down.
But
it's suffering all the way down.
It was so exciting to me. Group of artists that were very openly, there is bad art. There are bad artists, because the whole anybody can do it stuff, and that it's all just as good, and like skill is not a requirement. Not there. It was not there. That's for other places where they can do that away from us. And this, it's super exciting to me.
Yeah. Another thing, Sally, sorry, two more quick things. I think these are both Sallyisms too. Signing art is the propositional tyranny that John Vervaeke talks about, but for art. Signing art. I thought that was a really good insight. And the other good insight, and then I'll move back to you. Sorry. People rob others of reality by being nice. Obviously, that was you, Sally, right? And that was around the whole skirt person incident. So, I just wanted to sort of highlight that.
Look who joined us.
I saw that.
Nice to see you.
Saw that. Hey, yes. Well, and interestingly, I did want to point this out. I haven't read it yet, but I did read the first page. I've read the first page on my Discord server twice to various audiences now, because effectively that's all the language we've been using. All the language we've been using for 4.5, 5 years, whatever it's been now. Same language. And never read the book. Still waiting to read the book. So yeah, Tumor, you were going to say something before I interrupted. I'm sorry.
I don't remember what.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
well, I don't feel bad.
I mean, maybe one thing but Sally touched on it. So I think what you hear, if you look at the Tumblr generation, let's say, maybe that's more of like, I was one of them. I gotta admit that. The thing that you hear is like, if you like do bad art and write bad poetry and all that stuff, and I agree with it. I think that it's a good thing to do in your on your own. Like, do that by yourself. You can practice things, and you can also practice like finding out what you think. and how you feel about things. I think that's a necessary thing to do, but we tend to pair that with the necessity to display it to the world, and I think that's where the problem comes in. You probably would. Neil probably would as well. There's so much music on my computer that I have not released and I will never release because it's just not good. It's just, oh, I have this idea, and it, first of all, it sounds shit now that I listen to it back, and then also like nothing ever came of it. And so I hope that is the case for the majority of people who put stuff out, and I think so as well. So most of the things are just not worth presenting to the public, and we have lost maybe our sense for maybe for shame about those things. Like I'm ashamed of the bad art that I did put out, because there's some stuff that I'm not very happy about. So yeah.
No, that's good. I think that goes back to sort of what we were saying, right? In terms of filters, right? Filtering things out, judgment, right? Not being nice about things, right? People wanting to be heard, even though what they have to say is garbage. I'm sorry. Like, most of the things I say is garbage. That's why I say it on my Discord server where Manuel tells me I'm wrong. It's fantastic. Manuel's great. He just tells me I'm wrong. Now you guys don't have to put up with it. You should all pay him money for that service, by the way. Very valuable, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it's all wrapped up in our inability to judge, which I would say is our lack of poetic knowledge. It's all wrapped up in our unwillingness to judge, right? People rob others of reality by being nice. Right?
So 80 to 90% of like visual art stuff is stuff that you should throw away. And there were a couple of successful lessons I got through art school. And one of them was the actual work you're doing when you're drawing isn't the piece you're working on. It's your ability to draw the line should be what your work is. And then the other one is how to take a critique, how to give a critique. Now, unfortunately, I didn't keep a critique group out of art school. Maybe because of political differences, maybe just because I moved. I don't know why. But like, I continuously and probably indefinitely abuse the Navigating Patterns chat room as my critique group. And there's a lot of stuff that I put in that people are like, what? Who? Why? How? And there's no, and it doesn't go any further. It goes any further. And I categorize my work. And so I have a whole section that's at the Notepad Guts section, which is what my Twitter is. That's my like nothing work. That's my work that like could be developed into something, but I would never put it in a gallery. And this is something that I don't know if I came up with organizing my work in 3 categories after I found Jonathan Paggio, or it just aligns with it because it's right. But his organization of explaining where the work goes in the cathedral, to having the gargoyles and the grotesques and the wild on the exterior, and then having things slightly more holy, like all the way up to the altar place, massively helped me. Because for one, as a Baptist, doing visual arts at all is suspect. And then I've always had the desire to draw a certain amount of monsters. And it's like, why am I doing this? And I'm like, I got to. Can't not. Gonna draw monsters. Sometimes at 2 a.m. Like, it's just not something that I can't do. And so then what do you do with it? I'm like, oh, well, I've never had the compulsion to put one behind the pulpit at church. So I'm probably fine. That's nice. That was just like a huge relief. It's like, okay, like that's where I'm putting things. But yeah, you need to some extent, you have to put your work in front of other people, but you shouldn't be expecting an applause. In fact, you shouldn't even want one. You should want them to pick it apart and tear it down and pull out that one piece of good so that you can next time cherish that and plant that again and let it grow into something good. Like, that's what you should be doing with yourself. Like,
and you shouldn't put it in front of just anybody.
No,
because maybe if you have bad art of any kind and it resonates with the wrong person, it makes you both worse.
Yeah,
that's why I like a lot of Nietzsche as a Christian, not only as a person, because that's what he did with contemporary Christianity. And I think it's something that's very helpful with my music as well. Like, I have people that I can show it to. Sadly, most of them aren't musicians, so the feedback that I get is limited. But it's still helpful. But there's one very interesting thing. I don't understand it yet, but I know that it happens, is that when you have something for yourself that you made, then your view on it is limited. And as soon as that's my experience, as soon as I have like a demo and I give it to someone, even before I get any feedback, I'm like, I should have done this, I should have changed this, I should have re-recorded that. It's very, very interesting how that works. Maybe that's just insecurity, though.
Oh,
I'm not entirely certain.
This is something navigating patterns has massively helped me with. Like, and I mean us as a collective group. I just am imaginatorily filling in the gaps. And so I will draw something and I don't understand how much of it is still just in my head. And so then I will show it to someone who, like, in context, I feel like I've came up with the idea with them. And like, this is constantly with manuals. Manuals like, what? How does that mean anything? And I'm just like, oh, okay, shout. This was just me. And I can start again. And sometimes we can walk it all the way through. But even just like the 2 figures with the pointing hands, like, you would think 2 figures with pointing hands would be an easy project. Oh my God. Like,
How long did that take us?
8 months or a year. I don't know. But they were imagining a thing. I was imagining a thing. And then I would draw it. And they'd be like, no, it's still wrong. And then they'd draw it. And they'd be like, no, it's still, and just back and forth and back and forth. And like, yeah.
How did that take so long?
I don't know.
I don't, it's pretty simple.
We had to give up on realism to some extent because we needed angles to be more important than the hands. And then you didn't even know she should be on a stool. And so that had to happen.
No, that was a last minute Sallyism that just.
Yeah. But that's what you meant. You just didn't know that you meant that. So
well, yeah, exactly. Right. We end up with the woman on this brick pedestal at the last minute, never discussed. And then it's like, how did I miss that? Why didn't I know that? How did we all miss that? Yeah. And that is it, that, you know, but it is that healthy feedback. And this sort of goes back to something that I did a talk a while ago with on Pastor Paul Vanderklay's channel, right, with Joey and Father Eric, right, about basically 2 atheists fighting two clergy, which I'm not an atheist, never was, but one of the comments on that video that I think got deleted was somebody in the therapy sort of arena was saying the big problem that people have is not knowing where they end and other things begin. And that's what you described. Like, how much of what's in my head is shared with the outside world? And how much of what's in my head is just in my head? And you can't get that as easily, not saying at all, but as easily from a book or from a video or even from a conversation online, right? You really need to instantiate it, draw it, make a song about it, right? And then get the feedback, expecting negative feedback. For me, I actually don't like praise. I prefer people tell me what I did wrong. That's much more useful. I'm just a utilitarian in that sense. It's like, tell me what I did wrong so I can make it better. That's me being a perfectionist. This is not me being humble. Hopefully I'm humble in other ways. That's not me being humble. I'm glad it looks like that, though. It makes me look better than I am. Hallelujah. But no, this is me being a crazy OCD perfectionist. But we need that feedback. And we should want that negative feedback. And we're living in a world where we don't. This goes back to B.F. Skinner and positive only feedback and all the stuff we talked about earlier in the stream, I think, or at least I did, because I tend to do that. You know, all of these things, though, you know, it is navigating patterns. That is the YouTube channel, right? All of these things are patterns or threads that hold together. And that's actually what I try to exemplify is these patterns, these threads. We need to worry about orientation. We need to understand where the lines and boundaries actually are in the world. And I sort of want to kind of highlight that. And Adam, you've been quiet for a while. So, you know, around that theme of lines and boundaries, and you can go with the negative, the transgressions, like skirt person or whatever. What did you see in the conference around sort of lines and boundaries?
I don't. So with the lines and boundaries, I think. I mean, so we were doing the history kind of run, the kind of history talks, and then there's something about the way Martin Shaw was doing things as well. I mean, you mentioned, and it is true, and it makes sense that people wouldn't notice this, but it is necessary to tell a story the way that I would be familiar with telling a story. And then I think Eddie Lenihan, the guy whose videos I sent you, I think this is the way his stuff works as well. When there is no necessarily end to the story, there's no the end, and that open-endedness, reboundaries, actually allows that kind of story you're participating in to kind of not to be so strictly bounded in time.
Ooh,
And I guess in
like
that sense, it's giving you a lot of space instead. Something like that, maybe.
It opens a space, right? A story has a structure,
Yeah.
right? It has the bones, right, that it's following. So that constrains you so that you can make through it, right? Sort of have expectations. And it also, having expectations gives you the opportunity to have expectations subverted, right? So it's one of those cases where, the positive case allows the negative case to be a positive, right? Because you started, because it matters where you start, not just where you're standing. It's my one criticism of Jonathan Pichot. He's given up on where you're standing, but where are you starting, right? You start with an expectation. You can have it subverted. If you don't start with an expectation, you can't have it subverted. That's why modern movies suck. See Critical Drinkers YouTube channel. It's one of the many reasons, right? You're kind of expecting it to be garbage. When they do something that's anti-tropic, right? It's like, oh, there's an old trope about Star Wars, and then when they do the opposite, you're not surprised. It's like whatever. Maybe you don't know what to expect, and that's sort of that's sort of a problem, right? Because then the quote trick of subversion doesn't work anymore, right? It relies on the opposite in order to exist,
right?
And it's strictly parasitic in some sense. Not that that's a full negative, but yeah. And so the story has a structure, it has some bounds, but it's not closed, right? It doesn't have that ending. Yeah, I know. I was talking to Father Eric, and he said, I like the ending of the Martin Shaw story. I'm like, it didn't have an ending, dude. And he's like, what? I'm like, what was the ending? And he's like, I don't remember it. I'm like, that's because it didn't have one. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but also that happened, right? It's important to notice, because people get tied up. Like, well, if you tell a good story, this can happen. It's like, well, you get a lot tied up in telling, a lot tied up in good, and a lot tied up in story, and a lot tied up in the result. Because I say something, Manuel hears one thing, Sally hears another thing, you hear another thing, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I said the same words to all of you at the same time, in the same context. Doesn't work. Sometimes it works. Doesn't work. Not
but that's why you have the story in a context of a whole room full of people, right? So there's that. And then there's the kind of the universal history aspect, I think, kind of let's say weirdly ties in with the boundaries, because in some sense it's kind of I think it was Father Stephen de Jong's talk was about choosing your history, right? Which is very, very interesting. There was a kind of point where okay, so you had the kind of initial comments of Latin East, or pardon me, Greek East, Latin West, and he was saying Latin's boring, ha ha ha. But then he kind of got to this point where he was saying kind of Virgil was kind of Roman propaganda. But somebody asked in the questions, how do you go about choosing, right? And it's like kind of choosing what story you're kind of going to be a part of. And I actually can't remember what his response was, but just even that question is like, I'm not exactly sure that's something you can do, strictly speaking, in the sense that like I grew up in Ireland, right? I grew up among Irish people. I can't just plug myself into, like, I don't know, being a Greek. You know what I mean?
Or a Buddhist.
And right.
or a Hindu, or a Tibetan monk, or
Sure. And so it's kind of, I don't know. The kind of, there was a kind of weird boundlessness there that was kind of, I don't know. I thought maybe Father Stephen might push back on that, but I don't
Hmm.
for whatever reason, I guess he didn't. I was kind of sitting there thinking that's a little bit strange. And then there was Deacon
Kotar, Nicholas
Kotar.
Kotar.
That was, yeah, again, that was kind of, he was talking about Russian fairy tales. That was interesting. I think I don't know whether he really touched on. Oh yeah, actually no, there was something about boundaries in there, because it was about the Baba Yaga, and people approaching the Baba Yaga, and how if you observe the boundaries in the proper way, you can get very widely different results.
Yeah,
So,
you follow the rules of hospitality, and
yes,
the Baba
that was
Yaga
it.
doesn't eat you. Even though the Baba Yaga is trying to eat you and says, like, I'm going to eat you. And you're
Yes.
like, no, dude, I'm following the rules. You can't eat me. And so
Yes.
there's a horrible monster. But when you follow the rules, the horrible monster doesn't eat you. And
Yeah.
and this goes back to, I think what you were touching on is submission. You
Mhm.
were born into a place at a time. You can take the Sam Harris, I had no choice in that. Maybe you didn't. I don't know. I don't know how you determine that, by the way. It's a silly question.
Yeah.
Right. But you are submitted to that. And you can't just decide, I'm going to be Buddhist now. Like, that just isn't an option that is available to you. Almost certainly, maybe 1 in a billion people. But
Sure.
you're not that person, by the way. So don't waste your time. Right. It's like, if you were the Buddha, you'd know. Don't worry about it. You don't worry about it.
Right.
You wouldn't have to question it. If you're questioning it, you're not the Buddha. It's not that hard. That's what the Easterners would say, by the way. So just to like proper Buddhism, not Western Buddhism that we all know and unfortunately love, even though we're wrong about how the East thinks about it. That you're submitted to that. And sort of the best talk in the whole thing was that talk on sacrifice. And I know in our little section of the Peterson sphere, we all cheered, sacrifice, yes.
Excellent.
And my only critique, such as it is that the secularists are not going to like the word sacrifice one little bit, because it's too Christianese, right? I think trade-off is a better, I have a video on that on navigating patterns. Of course I do. Trade-off is probably a better way to start talking about it with people in the meaning crisis, or people who are not able to just go to church, as Jonathan Joe excellently and should continue to say, right? Those people, trade-off is probably a better way in. But the idea that they're talking about sacrifice was great. I thought that was fantastic. I think that probably, Chad, I don't know if you heard earlier, no, that's mercy's destroying the world. And so the idea of sacrifice, mercy, empathy, this whole frame is garbage. It's garbage. It's just how we got here. Let's not do more of it. Right?
So here's the problem. What people are terming niceness is actually emotional comfort.
Right.
And the niceness is subverting kindness. Because when people are catering to other people's emotional comfort instead of their overall welfare, that's what's wrecking everything.
Right. Well, and Sally, you touched on it, and we'll use the example, right? We'll use the example. So when we were talking about this image and how to build this image, and I think it was 2 years. Actually, it took us to draw this simple thing. It's ridiculous. It's so amazing. And it came out better than it was in my head. So like, that's all. That's a miracle. As far as I'm concerned, there's a miracle. Having the constant negative feedback from Manuel and Mark about, no, what are you doing? Why don't you understand? Pointing. Why can't, no, that just the arm needs to, the two arms need to join. The other arm, what? I think that was helpful. Like, it was contentious, and at times maybe people rage quit. Maybe me, maybe Manuel, certainly Sally. But what emerged for me, like what emerged is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's so amazing. It's so deeply symbolic, maybe more for me or us than other people. It was worth all the hassle. It was worth the fight. It was worth the battle, because it was a battle.
All of that, now somebody who's more skilled than me could do it better. That's the thing. If you stick with it, like, because that's not its ultimate form. It could be done better. Heck, I could maybe do it better now that I understand what we're talking about. But that initial hardship of pulling that concept out of your guys' head and putting it visually, it's not a loss, even if it's not in a perfect form, is my point.
Right.
It's not a loss, even if it's in an imperfect form, to go through struggle and suffering to figure something out. And if you're worried about niceness, man, if we would have, oh my God, imagine a world where we tried to force Manuel to be nice and polite the whole time that he give me feedback on a drawing. That would not be useful. That would be so inefficient.
Your drawings would suck.
They would, that would not be helpful. Like, I don't want that. Like, I don't want, like, that, oh, it's wonderful. You should, oh my gosh. Put it on Etsy. No. That.
Etsy is the right place for that. I'd like to touch on the mercy of a sacrifice bit for a second. I think that it's I mean, that's probably obvious, but it is something that has to be done in a relationship, let's say, because what we want from like, speaking from a Christian perspective, excluding all the atheists now, what we want is we want the mercy from Christ, and we need it. And I mean, he's going to give it to us. That's a comforting thing about him. And on the other hand, what we need to do is sacrifice. And I don't think that trade-off fits it, because I mean, you can try to make the point that in the end, that's what's happening, because you are sacrificing something, and we expect, like, the big thing, we expect to enter the kingdom afterwards. But in my experience, when I try to sacrifice as a trade-off, when I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'll get this, then it doesn't work. But the moments that, and they're few, I'm working on that, but they're few, the moments that I actually manage to sacrifice something, like for a second, those are the ones that are transforming, and those are the ones that actually have an effect on me, like a positive one. And so it's something that can only be done in a person to Christ relationship, and maybe then on the lower levels on a person to person relationship, because you have someone around you and you try to figure out how to have a relationship with that person, and so you're gonna have to make compromises, and that's technically a trade-off. But it doesn't work like that, because if I go to someone and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this thing for you, and then you have to do this for me, then it's yeah.
No, I don't disagree. My point, and I think Father X finally come around to this. He told me about this recently. Small steps, baby. Small steps. Get them to understand trade-off first, because trade-off works two ways. The way you're talking about, you get, but trade-off also works for if you, and this is the way Peterson does trade-off. Right, without using the term trade-off. He says, what do you have to do to get, what do you have to give up to get what you want? It's like, yes. What is it that you're not doing, playing video games, to be at the Symbolic World Summit? Well, I have to not play video games for 3 months to have enough money to go. Sure. And I did want to. So, but for me, it's small steps. I think that the problem with secular thinking, as opposed to symbolic thinking, is secularists they just have tiny tools. They can only do little steps. Technically, I'm not using that derisively. I'm just saying they just have small tools that are very limited, and they need to be stepped through these things in very small steps compared to people who have had experience, with these sort of larger steps. And I think that's super important. And I want to do one thing, Adam, and then we'll get to you. I just wanted to highlight Nancy. Nice is also about immediate comfort above all else, and I think that was sort of part of the problem. So now, Adam, you have to go. So, and I do want to wrap this up anyway, because it is getting late. I got to eat dinner at some point, and then Father Eric's got his stream, and et cetera, et cetera. But give us your closing thoughts, at least, Adam, and tell us, give us your little wrap up.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, all in all, the conference was great, both as an opportunity to kind of meet new people, meet you guys in person again. Me and Mark have met in person before. Meet Sally, meet Father Eric. The talks, particularly the universal history, is something I'll be thinking on probably for the next couple of months, to be honest. I'm very happy that they have it accessible on live stream, because there's bits which I wasn't taking notes, so I was just kind of there. So I have more impressions that don't have words associated with them, rather than kind of having the impressions and the words all the way down. One thing I wanted to do, which I didn't get to do, was ask Richard Rowland about the kind of difference between the Far East and the Far West. And that's something I want to explore. I probably will be exploring, because I'll be going to something like the Far East next in the coming April. Yeah, I think niceness will not save the world. People should not be nice. I'm speaking as an Irishman. The best thing that could ever happen to me as a young guy in Ireland is really just the kind of the negative feedback. It's the negative feedback in the way that is actually kind of positive. It's in the sense that you actually grow from it. That's necessary, and that if you kind of abdicate leadership, you cannot demarcate boundaries, and then nobody knows what's going on, and nobody knows how to navigate. So I can't tie that into history, but at the moment, but I'll get there eventually. So thank you. I'll head off here anyways, because I got to get ready for work tomorrow. So
thank you, Adam. Have a great night. Yeah, I do think we want to wrap it up. Two more. Why don't you go next with sort of your wrap up thoughts, and you can throw anything in there that you want. And I do want to really thank you. I'm so glad that you are interested in doing this. I really value, like, your perspective is excellent, not only because you're a volunteer and a musician, but also because you're really a good person. You've been involved. You're sort of like in that symbolic world in a way that unfortunately we're not, which is good. Like we should not be doing the same thing. So I did want to preface with that. I was just absolutely thrilled that you were so willing to join us. I do really appreciate that. But please give us your wrap up.
Wrap up of the conversation, or the summit?
The conference in general, I think, or anything you want. Like it's fine. And we'll, I'll do Sally, then I'll do me, and we'll shut it all down. But yeah, whatever you want.
Sure. Well, I'll try to like maybe on the conversation, and then I'll do on the summit. We kind of lost track of the summit, I think, which was fun because we got into so much interesting stuff. I think there's a bunch of other conversations to be had, probably going from this. So like we've been going for 3 hours now. I think we could have done probably another 6, technically. Like there's some stuff about Nietzsche, for example, that would have been interesting to get into, and like what Tom said, trade-off is not what it feels like. That's exactly it. Like the moment when you hold on to it, it's not a sacrifice. And so that's I think that shows probably also in Christ on the cross, when he says like, Father, why have you forsaken me, something like that, is like this total loss of holding on to life and holding on to maybe something like hope, because otherwise it doesn't help. Otherwise you're not really letting it go, and otherwise then you can't die, so that you also can rise from the ashes, if you want to put it that way, to Firebird, like so I think that's it's an acceptance of loss. That's and that's really hard to do, especially when you keep in mind all the time that it's but maybe this could happen, maybe this could happen. Like, sometimes when we let things go, they come back to us, but sometimes they don't. So it's yeah, it's weird. It's a weird experience, really. Yeah, but that was like the whole conversation was a lot of fun. I'd love to do it again. So whenever you have something like this and you want to have me on, just hit me up. That's I'm down.
Okay.
Always, I love so I love attention. So no, okay. No, I love to talk to people about this stuff. It's really fun. And then on the summit, I've been like, I'm not gonna lie, I was, especially on the day, I was very much teary-eyed, and that's an understatement. The whole like I'm like a little child when it comes to that, because people were coming up to me, and I'm not saying that to brag, like, I'm being real honest. Like, people were coming up to me and telling me, like, oh, I love your music, and I was genuinely surprised about that, and I was beyond happy. That was it's like, I started making music when I was 13, and I had like the common, like, the dreams that you have when you're at that age, and that's kind of the dream come true, but a lot better than I could have imagined at any point. So that was crazy. I got to meet all the people that had such a big effect on my life, like in a positive way. Yeah, that was very touching. And then having Jonathan thank me in front of the people with the other guys as well, that was crazy. So that was like, to make it about me. That was my that was my personal take, what I took away from that. And then in general, I just really hope we can do that again. I hope, like, Jonathan was kind of bummed out at the end, I think, because it was so stressful to do the thing. But I think it's very important that we collectively bully him into making this again sometime, because it's very important, as they said when they were on stage, is that it's one thing to sit in front of the screen and like, oh, have you seen this symbolism thing? Have you seen this discussion? Oh yeah, that's so. But it's a whole different thing to meet with people and then make these kind of connections, which at this point is kind of cliche to say, but yeah, that was like, I still can't believe it happened. That's my recap.
Oh, great. Thanks. Sally, what do you want to, and I just real quick, absolutely. We'll do more of these conversations if people want to. I'll host them on here and on StreamYard or whatever. So don't worry about that. Sally, go ahead with your wrap up.
So I'm going to tie this into real life, because I think that's what the idea of the summit was too. In our day-to-day, in this world of these different types of domicide, we're lost in distractions, because we're not finding traction in our immediate life. And the summit was this little window into what things can be like if you're famous within your 5 miles, because we kind of took our little internet world, because it's not a big space, 700 people in the entirety of the world. That's not a big space, but it was kind of like pulling in our 5 miles and seeing what life could be like. And I think I really like that idea of being what you could be within your 5 miles, and bolstering the strength of this kind of thing into your day-to-day, even if that's cleaning your table and having your home in order, so that if your internet friends can visit you, you have a place for them. And maybe that's once every 5 years. But if that's your 5 miles, that's your 5 miles. And I think this offered us an opportunity to see how we could be part of a good day-to-day life for the people who have made our good day-to-day lives better. And I think one of the peak achievements of this conference was that first night that Peterson could be there in jeans and sit in a row unharassed and listen to his friend and some music without people making that impossible for him. And I'm very happy to be part of a group of people that could make 3 hours of someone who have given us so many hours possible.
No, I like that. Yeah, the Be Famous Within 5 Miles, Dr. Martin Shaw. That was another. I don't know how that didn't make it my list. It's in there now. Yeah, and one thing I think actually, Sally, you were talking about this. We do not build stone buildings, so we live out of suitcases, and that goes back again to John Vervaeke's Domicile. I'm a big Vervaeke guy, even though I have many criticisms of his work, probably because I know it so well. That's the Domicile. We're living out of suitcases. Right. We're living online. We're living in video games.
And
these are not permanent buildings. They're not permanent structures. They're not things that will last for ages.
Well, Vesper Stamps brought up that if you cease to build cathedrals in space, then you build them in time. And I think the Symbolic World Summit very successfully took all of this magnificent stonework and architecture and grace that we've been spreading out and put it in time for a minute. And I think we can see examples of how to do that. I think Thunder Bay was like that, and I think we're having a real. It's a good thing, and it's not trivial, even if it's once every so many years. So.
Right? No, and I, I'm sure I've done this before. I'll do it publicly. I do want to thank you for when I went out to Thunder Bay. You had a place for me to stay, to visit your internet friend to come and visit. That was the first time we met when we went over the dog-headed books, which you had already prepared. This time I brought the prepared dog-headed books. So yes. So yeah, thank you for that wrap up, Sally. I did want to address Nancy. I'm hoping that Jonathan Peugeot delegates more organizational stuff to Richard. Yeah, it sounds like that's what's going to happen. Also, Martin Shaw may be interested in another, and it could be more of an anchor, right? So that people don't have to do so much. Yeah, I think that's part of it. A lot of people are trying to do their own thing, and that's just too much for any one person to do. And Tom, the Symbolic World folks are excellently well behaved. Yeah, they really were, especially in the beginning. Peregrine, thanks. You brought it home to us. Oh, I hope so. So for my wrap up, again, 2 more. Thank you. We'll do more of these. If you want to do more of these, I love talking to you. I love having you on. I'd love to dive into you with your knowledge of Christianity and Nietzsche and things like that, because we haven't chatted, unfortunately, nearly enough. So that would be fun. Maybe we can drag Manuel or somebody else, a few other people in, right? Just to have a richer discussion, or if you just want to do you and I, that's fine too. I do that with Adam. So whatever we can do. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. This conference was just an example of something for me that comes from the Peterson Sphere, petersonsphere.com. We're working on that website. It's up. You can visit the timeline. Something that came out of the Peterson phenomena, right? However you want to frame that is lasting and has lasted and is a thing that you can point to. Symbolic World. Okay, they've got a website. They've got a Facebook group. They've got a summit under their belt, right? They've got a band, right? They've got your music, right? Right. So there's all this stuff that's happening, that's coalescing, that's forming within the sphere of Peterson's influence, right? And as a direct result, I would say, of his rise, if you want to put it that way. And this is a great example of how that should work, and what it looks like when it's healthy, and how it enhances the lives of the people who participate. Partially because they're able to participate in person, in an event that just not anybody could walk in off the street and disrupt, even though, to our point, we did have some minor disruptions, which is no fault of the organizers. And so I thought that was, that was really the curiosity for me as an online community builder and someone who built a community for a while around John Vervaeke's work, until the snakes got it, right? That, to see that work and to see it expand beyond, say, the online community aspect, which I've experienced before, but not recently. It's been a few years since I saw anything sort of expand from online to sort of real life or meet space, however you want to frame it. That, to me, was what this represented, was that we can call it an emergence, right? It emerges from the emanation of Peterson talking about these issues. I'm going to have an article up on the Peterson Sphere website about this, right? Peterson's this lightning rod for these things. And then all this stuff, if properly oriented, can hold together and actually manifest in the world and create great relationships. I'm hoping Eamon, I hate to mention him again, but I'm hoping we can work with him because he's got some skills. He's going to help us with the virtue cards and gaming, hopefully, to help Sally's art, right? Help people in the meaning crisis, maybe a few crisis of faith people, right? People who've lost their Christianity or whatever. Help people in general, hopefully, who are lost, hopefully like a skirt person, right? To be better. Because that's really, for me, that's what it's all about, right? At the end of the day, that's what we want. And look, I'm going to put up on the description. I didn't do it because it's just, I've been super busy and I forgot to do a bunch of things. I had to race around today. I'm going to put up in the description any links to any of the stuff we've talked about. Maybe I'll find that Liberty University talk. But two more. Look, you're very modest. Please, whatever you want to say at the end here, and I will let you end it out in this case, and then I'll thank everybody. Whatever you want to add, but also please tell us, where can we get more of your work? Because your work is really good and important, and it's part of this Peterson sphere phenomena. So tell us about that and anything else.
Okay, so I have nothing that's very new that I could plug, except the latest song that I put out with Jordan and Mathieu and my friend Kara Nodrick, who did some background vocals on that as well. Really beautiful, it's called Adam Solved That. It's from Mathieu's and Jordan's talk from, like, I think maybe 2 years ago now, where they talk about what actually was the sin of Eve, what was the problem, which is, like, spoiler, it was giving him a riddle that he can't solve, and which is then explained in the song. Like, I worked on that for a year. It's worth listening to it. One of the songs that I'm particularly proud of. Other than that, I have one thing coming up, but it's going to take some time till I'm done with it, because I'm gaining now access to the audio recordings of the summit, and so I'm going to try and put that together as an album. That would be really cool. I'll hope I can incorporate some of the other artists that were there as well. Not going to say more. And yeah, that's what I'm working on. If you want to be excited for that, but it's going to take a while until it's done. And you can find me anywhere. I think that you find me on YouTube under Is That Weird? That's like the label that I'm publishing under. And you can find me on Spotify and all the other, like, streaming services under Two More V's, as you can see written, like, I think down here. I highly appreciate it if you stream my stuff, if you buy my stuff. It's always helpful. I'm a poor student, so I can use the money. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, the thing that I'd like to, so two things. We kind of did that. Listen to Dirt Poor Robin's album Firebird when I was flying home, like across the Atlantic. I listened to it 10 times in a row. I'm not lying. I did that nonstop. It's it's amazing. It's an amazing record, really. And the thing about the summit that I'd like to focus attention on just for a second is the very end of the last bit that Jonathan had. If you listen to watch the recordings of it, is when he thanks his wife, because I think that's and that ties into what you just said. It showcases what the whole thing is about, because it's nice to talk about these lofty ideas, and I'm very guilty of focusing on that too much, because it's fun and it's a place where you can be very it's a protected place where you also can just let yourself go, thinking about high ideas and all that stuff. But what it really comes down to is like the human to human. It's almost cliche to say that, but what it really comes down to is the human to human relationship. And that's why we want to go to church. In a sense, it's a person to person relationship. That's why we want to be involved and live in the symbolic world. That's why we want to escape, let's say, from the modern world where we are all zombies, trying to consume each other instead of engaging with another person. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I did, Neil. I already got 3 new songs. I'm working on more. It's gonna be fun. So yeah, I think that's because that was also what touched me the most in the end. So I think that is what it's about. That is what we have to move towards. Some of us are already there. Some of us are still moving towards it. It's yeah. I was and I still am at a loss for words about the whole thing.
Great, great. Yeah, look, I'm going to add one quick little thing. There was a Q&A that Jonathan Michaud did. He doesn't remember about three or 4 years ago on the Awakening server, and I have to paraphrase it because it's a little bit long. But he basically said, "Well, one of the reasons you go to church is because you're doing something that sometimes on any given day you don't want to do, right? To be with people you don't want to be with." Maybe only some of them, maybe all of them, right? And learning that skill is what we're missing in society, for real. The ability to do something we don't want to do, right? The skill of doing something we don't want to do with people we don't want to do it with, to make the world a better place. And look, thank you everybody for watching. I'm really impressed at the engagement. I hope those StreamYard numbers are real. My last 2 streams have been just blowing up, apparently on Twitter, I hope. So it's wonderful for everybody watching. I really appreciate the engagement. I hope to do more of this. If you want to see more of this, like and subscribe on Navigating Patterns, and we'll try to do more. And I really appreciate everyone's engagement. And I do want to thank the organizers of the conference, Neil deGrade and Jonathan Peugeot, and everybody who was involved, all the volunteers like yourself. Thank you very much. It was really nice. It was good. I mean, you guys are doing the work that nobody wants to do. So I wouldn't do that work. That's for sure. There's certain things I'll do, but not that.
That's true. I couldn't have been there if it weren't for my mate Paul, who paid for the flights and the Airbnb and all the other stuff.
Oh, wow.
And then for Neil, who got me the volunteer place. I couldn't have been there otherwise. So I'm eternally grateful. It's amazing. Yeah.
No, that is wonderful. I'm so happy that you were able to go and that you get to be a volunteer and stuff. Because I know how expensive it was.
I don't, because I didn't pay for it. So
you get a nice B&B. I got a Roach Motel, which I'm not sad about at all. But yeah, but it was a wonderful experience, and thanks to everybody who made it happen and made 2 more Vs, and other people able to go who might not have been able to, and who set the boundaries and made the right exceptions so that the right people got in and got the right experience out of it. And hopefully we've spread that to sort of everybody else. And look, thanks everybody for the thing that I value the most, which is your time and attention.